Chapter 771. Qi Tianfeng's entire face turned red with anger, and his lips trembled as he said, "Jun Moxie, you used so many schemes to force the four of us into a dead end, and now you still have the cheek to say that we are despicable and shameless? Do you still have any shame? Do you still have any conscience?" Jun Moxie's gaze was cold and sharp as he said coldly, "Fellow saints, the four of you are currently at the end of your rope. There is naturally no need for me to lie to the dead, so I might as well let you die with understanding and be satisfied." He paused for a while and said slowly, "Ever since I, Jun Moxie, rose to power in Tianxiang, I have never thought of going against anyone. All along, if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. In my eyes, the three holy lands are even more high and mighty. Although I won't try to curry favor with you, I won't offend you either. Ever since I met Shui Yan, I, Jun Moxie, realized that there was actually a great calamity for the human race, the war for seizing the heavens that you guys always talk about. At that time, the two of us had discussed many times about how we should contribute during the war for seizing the heavens, how we should disregard the sacrifices to keep the strange races out of the pillar of heaven's mountains. Without being humble, at that time, the two of us felt that even if we had to throw our lives away at the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains, it would be worth it." As he said this, Chen Chong and the other three couldn't help but reveal a trace of shame. Obviously, they had guessed what he was going to say next. At that time, the three Holy Lands plan to deal with Shui Yan was already in its embryonic form, and it had been carried out before. Don't deny it, many years ago. I'm sure the few of you are well aware of it, right? But we never thought of revenge, or rather, even if we wanted to take revenge, it would have to wait until after the war for seizing the heavens. Shui Yan only wanted to maintain the stability of the continent and the safety of the human race in preparation for the war for seizing the heavens. Although I didn't approve of your actions from the start, I didn't say anything and chose to support you. But when Shui Yan showed mercy to the Holy Lands for the war for seizing the heavens, what she got in return was even deeper damage. But the appearance of my aristocratic hall's heaven-defying elixirs has led to the three Holy Lands resorting to all kinds of underhanded means to seize them. For the sake of the war for seizing the heavens, we'll endure it. But of all the things you shouldn't have done, you sent over 90 experts to break into the Jun family. You wanted to put the entire Jun family to death. You wanted to seize the pill formula. Then, you set up many interceptions on our way to the Dongfeng family. When I, Jun Moxie, was at home, you broke into the Jun family residence. When I, Jun Moxie, went to pick up my mother, you set up an ambush. They had slaughtered more than 10,000 Li. I, Jun Moxie, will ascend the snowy mountains. 500 to 600 of you. Prepare for battle. Even on Tianxiang's side, 9 saints have come. My beloved beauty was also besieged by you all. You even used my family as a hostage. Using such underhanded means, she was forced to consume the Saint King pill and perished. Jun Moxie chuckled and gritted his teeth. "Chen Chong, tell me, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stretched out your necks for you to kill? Would it be treason for me to deal with you all? Would it be despicable and shameless? What kind of underhanded methods did I use? My strength is inferior, but I still had to use my weakness to fight with you saints. Is that considered honorable? You all used underhanded methods, using your palms and swords to kill, but I used water, fire, and rocks to attack. Am I very underhanded?" Chen Chong was silent. Suddenly, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long sigh. A great sense of regret rose in his heart. "Even if you all still insist that I am underhanded, so what? I can't be bothered to talk to you about any great principles. I am even more disdainful, extremely disdainful," Jun Moxie said sternly. "From the beginning to the end, I have never thought of taking the initiative to make an enemy out of the three Holy Lands. But you have forced me step by step to this point where I will not rest until I am dead. You all brought this upon yourselves. What does it have to do with others? What does it have to do with me? For the sake of the world, it is indeed very noble and a very strong reason. But this is not a reason for our Jun family to be annihilated." Jun Moxie, said somewhat sorrowfully. Even if you kill someone for the sake of the peace of the universe, that person will definitely retaliate. Saint Chun Chong, do you understand what I am saying? Chun Chong was silent. Then he said calmly, of course I understand what you mean. Perhaps we have gone too far, but we have a clear conscience.
Yes.
You definitely have a clear conscience. When have you ever had a guilty conscience? Jun Moxie smiled coldly. So, now that you have fallen to this state, please do not say that I am shameless. Because I also have a clear conscience when I kill you all. All of you deserve to die. You deserve to die. No matter what powerful reasons you have, you only have to offend my Jun family, and you all deserve to die. Chun Chong shook his head and smiled bitterly. Jun Moxie, you have indeed gained the upper hand in this battle. But do you think that you can be so unbridled just because you have the upper hand in this battle? Yes, we are all seriously injured and have no strength to fight anymore. But you are not worthy to take our lives. He suddenly straightened his body and stood up. His body emitted a cold fighting spirit. He stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, Jun Moxie, come. Today, this old man will let you see what a saint is. Even if we are at the end of the road, the might of a saint is not something a junior like you can humiliate. He raised his head and said seriously, Jun Moxie, let this old man ask you something. That Yin Yang saint, Jiang Junji. Jun Moxie cut him off. Lingling said, he has already gone to fight for you. He died a comfortable death. It was just his corpse being torn apart by a pack of wolves. Chun Chong's body trembled. After a long time, he laughed and said, good, good. As expected, you are vicious and merciless. Jun Moxie, come. Let this saint send you on your way. Use your life to experience the terror of a saint. Chun Chong suddenly puffed out his chest, and a majestic and awe-inspiring aura suddenly gushed out. At this moment, although his clothes were still tattered and he was in a sorry state, his expression was calm, and his bearing was calm. His eyes were even sharper and more domineering. The might of a saint was displayed here. Jun Moxie laughed coldly and said, the strength of a saint?
Ha!
All right, let me see exactly what sort of shocking ability this saint who's in such a sorry state like a beggar possesses. As soon as he finished speaking, he roared with laughter and said, watch how I defeat 4 saints with a single strike of my sword. Who in the world can match up to this kind of awe-inspiring might? With a sword in hand, his white robes fluttered in the wind as he flew over with a swoosh. Chun Chong almost died from anger. If you were in your complete state, you would have to run away the moment you see a saint. In fact, even running would be a problem. But now, you actually dare to boast that you want to face 4 saints alone, but Chun Chong also knew that among the 4 of them, he was the only one who still had the slightest bit of battle strength. The other 3 could not even put up the slightest bit of resistance. If he was defeated, then the other party's boasting would become reality. The process was not important. The result was everything. As his thoughts spun, Jun Moxie's figure was already right in front of him. Chun Chong roared, and his body suddenly leaped up, tangling with Jun Moxie in midair. At some point, he had already drawn his sword, and the 2 of them began to fight. The more Chun Chong fought, the more dismal he felt. His remaining cultivation was simply too meager, and it was completely insufficient to defeat the other party. On the other hand, Jun Moxie became more and more courageous as the battle went on. When he gained the upper hand, he did not show any mercy. He fought with great vigor and vigor. When a tiger falls to the flat land, a dragon is trapped in the shallow waters. The more Chun Chong fought, the more aggrieved he felt. Suddenly, he let out a loud roar and retreated. If the 3 of you can return, just say that I, Chun Chong, have failed to live up to the expectations of the Saint King and could no longer do my best for the war for seizing the heavens. Chi Tianfeng was taken aback. Ignoring the excruciating pain all over his body, he jumped up and shouted, Brother Chinyu. Chun Chong laughed maniacally. His long hair burst out, and a bright light shot out from his eyes. His entire body suddenly swelled up, and his face turned as red as blood. Amidst his maniacal laughter, his black hair turned snow-white in an instant. He kicked out 3 times, sending Chi Tianfeng and the rest flying 300 to 400 zhang away so that they wouldn't be affected. Then, he charged at Jun Mo Xia and roared, "Jun Mo Xia, accompany this seed on the road." To be able to accompany this old man to roam the Yellow Springs is the greatest honor of a junior like you. Savor the taste of a saint and embark on the journey to the Yellow Springs. Jun Moxie snorted coldly, and his eyes lit up. Carefully feeling the powerful aura of a saint, he said indifferently, "Chen Chong, you're destined to be disappointed." In truth, ever since Jun Dashao left the snowy mountains, he had felt that his cultivation had reached a bottleneck, and he was about to break through to the 5th level. But throughout the long journey from the south to the north, and then from the north to the south, there was no movement. Until yesterday, when he battled with the 4 saints, he had unexpectedly comprehended some principles from their actions. But now, he suddenly had an epiphany. That was why he chose to fight with Chen Chong head-on the moment Chen Chong, and the rest came out from the foot of the mountain. It was because he wanted to feel the powerful aura of a saint. Otherwise, he would probably only appear after these people died. Why would he have any interest in wasting words with them? That was why he was fighting with Chen Chong one-on-one, and for such a long time, without using the power of the 5 elements to achieve victory. And Chen Chong's self-detonation this time would give him a huge mental blow. So Jun Moxie was filled with anticipation. Filled with anticipation. Chen Chong laughed loudly and said, "Junior, what capabilities do you have to disappoint Chen Mao? You will die without a doubt." Suddenly, he sped up, charging over with a speed that exceeded his limits. Jun Moxie's eyes narrowed, and his sword pierced forward, piercing right into Chen Chong's body. But at this moment, Chen Chong's maniacal laughter reverberated in the air, and with a loud boom, his body exploded. The nearby stone walls instantly collapsed, and rocks flew hundreds of zhang into the sky. A huge pit with a radius of tens of zhang appeared on the ground. An abnormally strong tremor swept Chi Tianfeng and the other 2, who were tens of zhang away, sending them flying. The 3 of them stabilized themselves with great difficulty and looked over anxiously. The smoke slowly dissipated, and the ground was silent. Chen Chong and Jun Moxie were no longer there. A saint was finally forced to self-detonate by Jun Moxie. Chi Tianfeng was stunned, and tears unknowingly flowed down his face. Who would have thought that at the last moment, Chen Chong would not hesitate to self-detonate and perish together with Jun Mo Xia. Only then would he be able to save the lives of the 3 of them. But at this moment, Sa Qing Lu suddenly cried out in shock, looking in a certain direction with a face full of disbelief. From the hazy smoke, a figure dressed in robes whiter than snow, untainted by a speck of dust, walked out slowly. His eyes were sharp, and his sword was as white as snow, glowing faintly. It was Jun Moxie. A second-level saint, Chen Chong, risked his life to self-detonate, but it actually did not cause any fatal damage to a second-level venerable. From the looks of it, he did not even suffer the slightest bit of damage. At this moment, the 3 of them were struck by this unbelievable and unimaginable reality. Jun Moxie, this youth, was he a human or a ghost? In their shock, they heard Jun Moxie Lengling say, "Do you want to settle it yourselves, or do you want me to send you on your way? I'll give you the right to choose." Chi Tianfeng and the other 2 laughed at the same time, saying in an unusually tragic manner, "Chen Chong risked his life for justice and bravely faced death. Could it be that the difference between us 3 brothers and others is so great? The 2 words life and death, we have long seen through them." Amidst the laughter, Chi Tianfeng said word by word, "Jun Moxie, you will definitely regret this. We will wait for you in the Yellow Springs. Wait for your entire family." Then, he struggled to gather with his 2 sworn brothers. Looking at each other, the 3 of them laughed together and said, "Let us be brothers in our next lives." Their bodies trembled, and they died by severing their own arteries. Looking at the 3 corpses on the ground, Jun Moxie finally heaved a sigh of relief. This grudge had finally come to an end for the time being. But what followed would probably be an even more violent storm. 4 saints had died just like that. Out of 9 saints, 8 had already fallen. Such a heavy blow. Even the 3 Holy Lands would not be able to bear it. So, what followed would definitely be an extremely tragic and crazy revenge from the 3 Holy Lands. It was a pity that Jun Emosia did not have the time to think about these problems. In fact, he did not even have the time to sigh with emotion. Because, after Qin Chong's explosion, a formless qi seemed to have been triggered, and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune in his body suddenly surged violently. His entire body was filled with the pure energy of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. In his consciousness, a thunderous sound rang out, as if the entire world was about to be destroyed. He was about to break through. The breakthrough that he had been preparing for a long time had finally arrived at this delicate moment. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows, but he continued to circulate the power of Earth. Suddenly, with a loud boom, a huge hole appeared under the 3 corpses, and they fell into the ground. Although they were enemies, they were still saints. Jun Moxie did not wish for their corpses to be left in the wilderness. After completing all this, Jun Moxie's body flashed and disappeared just as the shockwave from Qin Chong's explosion reached Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie had finally completed his comprehension of the first level of saint. Then, at this critical moment, he dove into the Hongjun Pagoda. The powerful shockwave from the explosion behind him had practically smashed him in. Mei Shuiyan, who was in the midst of cultivating, watched in shock as Jun Moxie flew in like a kite with its string cut, smashing into the Hongjun Pagoda with a loud bang. His hands and feet were stuck to the Hongjun Pagoda. Just as she was wondering why this fellow had entered in such a strange manner, she saw him sliding down from the pagoda with his face covered in dirt. Rubbing his slightly red nose, he mumbled, "My mistake, my mistake. The next time I come in, I will try to adopt a more elegant posture." Mei Shuiyan was speechless then. She saw Jun Emosia rushing out with a whoosh. After a short while, he flew back in with a heavy expression. His aura was unstable, and his voice had also become hurried. "Shui Yan, pay attention to your cultivation. I might be about to break through again. You must remember, when you break through, that kind of vibration here, that kind of feeling, it will be very useful for your future." After saying this, he hurriedly flew out again. Mei Shuiyan's eyes widened. He is about to break through again? Is he still human? Don't be so hurtful. How can a human improve at such a terrifying speed? Am I the Xian beast, or is he the Xian beast? Even Xian beasts are not like him. Even Xian beasts are not as good as him. I'm not in a good state these few days. As the new year approaches, there are suddenly more things to do. Looking at the thick New Year atmosphere outside, I suddenly feel very frustrated. After staying in the house for more than 2 years, I suddenly go out frequently these few days. Seeing everyone on the streets buying New Year goods, I suddenly feel very lonely. Chapter 772. Chapter 1. The first update. This was the 5th time that Jun Dashao had broken through. Naturally, it was a walk in the park for him. However, it was the first time for Mei Shuiyan, and it was the first time that she had tried it. Furthermore, for the current Mei Shuiyan, the high-level breakthrough experience that came with such a high-level mental cultivation technique was extremely valuable. This would be the most valuable experience for her future breakthroughs. At the very least, she would be able to know what was going on. Therefore, even though Jun Moxie was waiting for the fire to burn, he did not forget to come in and inform her. But after he went out, he immediately thought, "It seems like every time I break through, I have to do it in the Hongjun Pagoda. But I just went in. Why did I fly out again? Is it because she is in there that I'm muddle-headed?" Therefore, Jun Dashao immediately flew back in. Making a face at the astonished Mei Shuiyan, he disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving behind a sentence that, "I forgot, actually, it is only in here that one can have a better breakthrough. The heaven and earth spiritual chi here is you, that you understand." Mei Shuiyan was speechless. Raising her cute little paws, she covered her eyes. This guy is really too confusing. How can such a careless guy have such a terrifying speed of advancement? Is there still any justice in this world? Not long after, Mei Shuyan could clearly feel that the entire Hongjun pagoda was shaking. At first, it was like a gentle breeze blowing across the surface of the water, but slowly, the movement became more and more intense. It seemed like his breakthrough this time was not small. Mei Shuyan suddenly thought of Jun Moxie's words and quickly activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. She calmed her heart and soul and slowly comprehended that kind of high-level concept that could only be encountered but not sought. It was like the collapse of the universe, like the end of the world, like the rebirth of chaos, like the opening of heaven and earth. Jun Moxie had just sat down cross-legged when the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, which had broken through the limits, began to rebel in his body. The vast spirit energy that had originally melted into a ball suddenly scattered into thousands of strands and began to travel back and forth in Jun Moxie's meridians. Some of them were flowing in the same direction, some were flowing in the opposite direction, and some were even diverging. The clothes on Jun Moxie's body exploded into pieces with a loud bang. Small bumps could be clearly seen on the muscles on his body from time to time. It was as if there were small mice running back and forth, scurrying everywhere. If not for the fact that he clearly knew that he was in the midst of a breakthrough, Jun Moxie would have definitely thought that he had gone berserk. Even if he had really gone berserk, it wouldn't be this exaggerated. This situation was a little too terrifying. What followed was a wave of indescribable sharp pain, as if a red-hot steel needle had pierced into the depths of his brain when he was caught off guard. This kind of unbearable pain was so intense that Jun Moxie almost couldn't help but scream. But he forcibly endured it. There was no other reason. Jun Moxie had been worried about Mei Shuyan. If he really screamed out loud, not only would it not help, it would also make Mei Shuyan think that breaking through was extremely difficult. If it left a shadow in her heart, it would be very bad. It might even become a great demon in her heart when she broke through in the future. So, Jun Moxie tried his best to endure it. He allowed his muscles to bulge, his tendons and bones to twist, and the pain made him sweat profusely. But he clenched his teeth and did not move. He did not make a sound. This time, the intensity of the pain and the length of time it lasted had truly exceeded Jun Moxie's expectations. It was not the same thing as breaking through the first 4 levels, or it could be said that it was completely incomparable. Although the previous few breakthroughs were also painful, compared to the pain this time, the previous pain was like being pricked by a needle. Lightly breaking through to the 5th level was simply too painful. The effects of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune were indeed the best in the world. No, it was the best in the world. But it was also the worst in the world. Not only was it an unprecedented skill, it was also an unprecedented technique. Other techniques were based on years, but this technique seemed to be based on pain. Each level was more painful than the previous, and each level was more painful than the previous. It was indeed worthy of being a legendary cultivation technique. Jun Moxie laughed bitterly in his heart. Gradually, he did not even have the mood to comfort himself. As the pain escalated, even the nascent soul in Jun Moxie's dantian began to writhe and writhe from the endless pain. At times it was stretched out, and at other times it was crumpled into a ball. The nascent soul's aura was extremely weak, and there were even signs that it could collapse at any moment. This pain had reached its limit. If there was a limit to one's ability to endure pain, then Jun Moxie had broken through his limit countless times in this short period of time. Originally, when the pain reached a certain limit, the human self-defense mechanism would be activated, causing the person to unconsciously enter a state of unconsciousness. In medical terms, it was also known as shock. This was also a form of self-protection. But Jun Dashao's 2 lives were too different. In his previous life, as an assassin, he had to maintain a state of consciousness at all times. Shock? What the hell was that? It had never happened before. In this life, he seemed to have endured too much pain. When he gradually got used to the pain, even if the pain was more intense, he would not go into shock. Of course, the pain would still continue to hurt, and he would be able to endure the pain in an absolutely conscious state. That was the most unbearable. After an unknown amount of time, the pain finally showed signs of subsiding. Jun Moxie was just about to heave a sigh of relief when he discovered that the barrier of the fifth layer of the Hongjun Pagoda was still indestructible. The fifth layer of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune also showed no signs of loosening. What's going on? Just as Jun Dashao was feeling strange, an even more intense pain assaulted him like a tidal wave. In a split second, Jun Moxie's entire body convulsed, and his muscles twitched. It seemed as if his internal organs had been smashed into pieces. Such intense pain came wave after wave, and each wave was higher than the previous one. In total, it came 9 times. Even with Jun Moxie's unparalleled mental fortitude in this world, he was on the verge of collapsing. Being clear-minded did not mean that one's mental strength could withstand it. This level of pain was also a terrifying burden on one's mental strength. The sweat on Jun Moxie's body was like a small river, flowing down from all parts of his body, slowly forming a large puddle of water on the ground, just as Jun Dashao was in so much pain that he was mentally and physically exhausted, hovering between life and death. In a daze, he almost couldn't hold on any longer. Suddenly, Jun Moxie realized something else. This kind of indescribable pain. Even I am about to collapse. Then, if Shui Yan's cultivation reached the stage and needed to break through, she would be completely unprepared. How would she be able to endure it? How would she be able to endure it? As he thought of this, the pain in his body seemed to have subsided. Because he was already worried about Mei Shuyan the moment he was distracted, the feeling of pain also correspondingly decreased. At this moment, even if the feeling of pain decreased a little, it would still be good. Another point was that the process of breaking through this time was really too painful and too unexpected. Almost every time, the pain was more than the previous times combined. Why was it like this? What Jun Moxie didn't know was that the 5th stage of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune was a huge dividing line in the entire cultivation technique. Only after passing the stage could one be considered a true cultivator. It could also be said, only after passing this stage could one truly be considered to have stepped on the road to the peak. This stage, in a real sense, completely removed all the impurities in the human body, cleansing the entire meridians. From the 5 organs to the skin and hair, every part of the body was practically remolded. The entire body was as good as new. This stage was the beginning of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, and it was also truly worthy of the 4 words unlocking heaven's fortune. Following a soft explosion sound, the little person in Jun Moxie's dantian struggled in pain for a while, and finally, unable to bear the burden, it suddenly exploded and disappeared without a trace. The moment the nascent soul disappeared, Jun Moxie felt as if he had been struck by lightning. With a waft sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and even his eyes dimmed. Finally, this endless pain finally stopped, but Jun Moxie's body no longer had the slightest bit of strength. The current him, without any exaggeration, did not even have the strength to move his eyelids. Completely collapsed. This was really too painful, and he was both mentally and physically exhausted. At this time, at the top of the 4th level of the Hongjun Pagoda, a strange 7-colored brilliance suddenly appeared. After a moment, it slowly formed a special staircase and slowly extended to the feet of Jun Moxie. Then, at the highest position, a large door slowly opened. An unprecedentedly dense purple spiritual chi gushed out, almost boundless. Before this, no matter how rich and pure the spiritual energy provided by the Hongjun Pagoda was, even if it was condensed to the point of being almost solid, it was still a milky white gas. But at this stage, it had transformed into an even more mysterious purple spiritual energy. It was a dazzling purple, dazzling to the eyes. And this deep purple color seemed to contain an inexhaustible mystery. How can it be purple spiritual energy? Is this still spiritual energy? Jun Moxie didn't even have the time to raise any doubts, but this rich purple energy quickly submerged him like a tide and drilled into his body through the 7 apertures of his mouth and nose, through the pores of his skin, and melted into his meridians. After his nascent soul had exploded, his entire body had been on the verge of collapse. But the entry of this purple energy had immediately raised his vitality. And the original spiritual energy in his meridians had retreated little by little and melted little by little. Finally, it had disappeared without a trace. In the end, his meridians had been completely blocked by this new purple energy and had been filled up. The matters of these 2 days have left me battered and battered. Then, I discovered that I had lost a lot of face. I can only tell you the ending. The bag has been returned to its rightful owner. Let's not talk about this anymore. This matter was too shameful. Too shameful. Chapter 773. In June Moxie's Dantian, the new purple chi was becoming denser and denser. As time passed, it gradually formed a special whirlpool and began to rotate slowly. As it rotated, the purple chi in the Hongjun Pagoda seemed to have found its target and began to rapidly pour into June Moxie's body. The whirlpool in his Dantian also sped up from slow to fast and gradually formed a whistling sound similar to that of wind and thunder. It was clearly emitted from his body and was accompanied by the rumbling of wind and thunder. It was a breathtaking sound. At the moment when the whirlpool reached its peak, there was a sudden loud bang, and June Moxie's Dantian exploded. With this loud bang, the purple chi in his Dantian instantly disappeared. Everything was quiet. It was like a deathly stillness. June Moxie couldn't help but be alarmed. If my Dantian is empty, won't I lose all my power? You don't have to play with me like this, right? He hurriedly tried to mobilize the power in his meridians to investigate, but found that there was no movement in his Dantian. He then looked inside his Dantian and saw that it was empty. There was only a large amount of gray fog, which filled his Dantian, but it was motionless and difficult to mobilize. The original spiritual power had disappeared without a trace. And in the middle of that strange gray fog, there was a little bit of light. This little bit was only the size of a speck of dust and emitted a faint light. If one didn't examine it carefully, they wouldn't even be able to find it. It was like the vast night sky was full of fog, and there was only a small shining star in the distance, the tiny nascent soul, and the enormous flow of spiritual force that could be commanded like an arm and a finger were all gone. What is this? I've made a breakthrough. So why did I lose all my power? Even if it's the so-called break and then build, degenerate and then succeed, it shouldn't be like this. While June Moxie was wondering about the various changes that had taken place in his body, his mind suddenly tumbled, as if tens of thousands of rays of light had suddenly shone out from the gray clouds, and a few lines of words rolled out. The meaning of the words was obscure and simple, and directly reflected into the lake of his heart. June Dashao was no stranger to this, as he had experienced something similar before. This was definitely the mantra for the 5th layer of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. The beginning of primordial chaos, the secret of heaven and earth, endless life, unchanging since ancient times, heaven as heaven, earth as earth, life as continuation, death as continuation, exquisite 9 revolutions, the will of creation, 9 deaths of the soul, the silence of chaos. June Moxie inexplicably had an epiphany. It seemed that from now on, he could be considered to have truly stepped into the door of the unlocking heaven's fortune. The 5th level was the beginning of the journey. The art of unlocking heaven's fortune was not just a simple cultivation technique or battle technique. Its essence should be in the words creation of heaven and earth. And right now, his own cultivation technique was in the legendary state of chaos before the heaven and earth. Everything was still. Just like the chaotic gas in his Dantian, it was motionless. And only when it truly moved, then slowly evolved, until it could emit the first ray of light, rising and falling, forming the embryonic form of heaven and earth. This was the beginning of the creation of heaven. After that was the so-called evolution of the sun, moon, and stars, the process of creation of all living things. That was the so-called creation. All of this was the evolution process of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Only in this way could it be considered as the true creation of heaven's fortune. And the fifth layer that he was in, to put it nicely, was the beginning of the creation of heaven's fortune. In the end, it was in the beginning. Of course, it was also the most crucial level. Only with this level as the starting point would there be the subsequent process of creation. As for the previous 4 levels, at best, they were only for laying the foundation. Jun Moxie laughed bitterly, once again trying to mobilize the energy in his body. But he discovered that in his meridians, the vigorous energy in the past had completely disappeared. There was no way to mobilize it. The only thing left was a faintly discernible strand of purple chi. And this faintly discernible strand of purple chi was completely unfathomable. There was no way to assess its strength. In fact, Jun Moxie did not even know whether he had improved or regressed in terms of cultivation. Had he obtained everything? Or had he lost everything? Just like that, Jun Mo slowly walked up to the 5th floor of the Hongjun Pagoda. From simplicity to extravagance was easy, but from extravagance back to simplicity was difficult. Jun Dashao, who was used to flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth, suddenly reverted back to being able to walk on his feet, was really not used to it. The interior of the 5th level of the Hongjun Pagoda gave Jun Moxie a very strange feeling. This 5th level was like a small stone room, narrow and low. But when he thought about it this way, he suddenly felt that this small 5th level was clearly like a boundless void, vast and indistinct, completely unfathomable. These 2 feelings were polar opposites, simply contradictory to the extreme. But these 2 feelings were real. Which one is the real one? Which one is fake? This question suddenly popped up in Jun Moxie's mind. These 2 feelings, which one is real? Which one is fake? And just as this thought popped up in his mind, he suddenly stopped moving forward. It was not that he did not want to move forward, but he was forced to stop. It felt as if there was a solid wall in front of him, and he could not take another step forward. But in front of his eyes, there was clearly a void in front of him. This question seemed to be asked by Jun Moxie in his heart, but it also seemed like the Hongjun Pagoda was asking him. But there was one thing that Jun Moxie was very clear about. If he could not answer this question, he could forget about entering this place, not even a step forward. Real? Fake? Jun Moxie closed his eyes and pondered silently. After a long time, he slowly opened them and said lightly, "What is real? What is fake? Real and fake, it's all in my heart. If I say it's real, then it's real. Even if it's fake, it's still real. On the other hand, if I say it's fake, then it's fake. Even if it's not fake, it's still fake. Whether it's real or fake, it's just a thought in my heart. Only one thing is real. I am the owner of this place, and only I am real." After saying that, he took a step forward. It was as if he had completely forgotten about the invisible barrier in front of him. But after taking this step, he actually entered, easily and effortlessly, the 5th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. In the originally empty space, a small table suddenly appeared out of thin air. On the table was a book. It suddenly appeared in front of Jun Moxie. Just as Jun Moxie was about to step forward to see what was going on, an indescribable feeling suddenly arose in his heart. He stopped in his tracks and just stood there quietly. In front of him, 2 rows of golden words slowly appeared in the void. Do you want to use kindness to create creation? Do you want to use slaughter to split open the sky? 2 choices again. Will you use kindness to cultivate the path of creation, or will you use slaughter to face the common people and bathe the heavens with blood? Jun Mo silently thought for a moment. Then he suddenly laughed involuntarily. What is evil? Before the Hongmeng derivation, how could there be any difference between good and evil? These 2 choices are obviously nonsense. I've never thought of myself as a kind person, but I'm also not a so-called demon. I may not be a good person, but I'm definitely not a bad person. I'm free to repay kindness and hatred, and I have a clear conscience. When has kindness ever been far from me? When has slaughter entered the human world? I use my eyes to see creation. I use my heart to split open the sky. The answer was the same: idealism. As soon as these 4 sentences were spoken, the 2 rows of golden words suddenly disappeared. Even the small table disappeared in an instant. Only the book remained. It suddenly floated in the void, but in an instant, it turned into a majestic golden light and entered between June Moxie's eyebrows. There is nothing in the universe. One origin begins anew. 9 paths return. Today's birth is the end. Today's existence is eternity. Chaos Formation Solution. This was the title of the book. Following that, diagram after diagram of the formation slowly flowed through June Moxie's mind, like a clear stream. Everything could be seen at a glance, and the bottom could be seen. The boundless origin formation, the yin and yang dim light formation, the 3 light derivation formation, the 4 symbols all heaven formation, the 5 elements destruction formation, the 6 heavenly circles formation, the 7 stars heaven formation, the 8 extremes life and death formation, the 9 palaces formation, the 10 direction destruction formation. There were actually hundreds and thousands of formations of various sizes. Some were for life, some for death, some for slaughter, and some for defense. There were many types and endless variations. June Moxie let out a long breath. These formation diagrams would undoubtedly be a great asset for him to protect his life in the future. Although he hadn't obtained any specific skills yet, he had gained a lot of enlightenment. As long as these formations were set up properly, they would be the best guarantee for the safety of his family. For June Moxie, these were the most practical things he needed at his current stage. With these formations, he was even happier than giving June Moxie dozens of special skills. Ever since June Moxie entered the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shuyan had been in a meditative state outside. Although the weather inside the Hongjun Pagoda was pleasant, there was no difference between day and night. The people inside did not know how much time had passed since they entered the meditative state. In any case, June Moxie still had no intention of coming out. On the other side, when Mei Shuyan woke up from her cultivation, she realized that June Moxie had not come out. However, she wasn't anxious. Secluded cultivation was a long and drawn-out cultivation. It would be abnormal for someone like June Dashao to break through in just 3 to 7 days. Mei Shuyan looked at the results of her cultivation and felt that she had made great progress. Thus, she entered the meditative state again. When she woke up, she had already repeated the process 9 times. At this moment, her small body was completely covered by a thick white fog. Mei Shuyan was pleasantly surprised to realize that her cultivation was advancing bit by bit. She felt as though she could count it with her fingers. Chapter 774. The dense spiritual qi that had enveloped Mei Shuyan's small body had all disappeared. She had absorbed all of it into her own body and turned it into her own energy. The surrounding spiritual qi had also stopped surging towards her. Her cultivation had reached a bottleneck. She had to stabilize and refine it before she could break through to the next stage of cultivation. However, this speed of improvement had already caused Mei Shuyan to be pleasantly surprised. This cultivation speed was simply too fast. Although there was no sun or moon in the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shuyan could still tell that she wouldn't be cultivating for a long time. At most, it would only be 3 to 5 days. But in just a few days, she had risen from a non-ranked Xian beast to the peak of level 3. This speed was too terrifying. Although this was clearly happening to her, Mei Shuyan still felt like she was dreaming from time to time. It was too wonderful. Looking at the dense spiritual qi around her, Mei Shuyan felt like she was in a fairyland. There was no other reason. According to her long experience, even when she was at the peak of her cultivation, the spiritual qi that she could gather in the Tian Fa forest was not even 1/10 of the spiritual qi here. It was not even 1/100th of the spiritual qi here. The difference was like heaven and earth. Mei Shuyan estimated that the difference in the spiritual qi between the two places was more than 100 times. In addition, although the spiritual qi in the Tian-Fa forest was also very dense, far better than that of the mortal world, the quality of the spiritual qi was also very heterogeneous. After absorbing the spiritual qi into her body, she needed to spend a lot of effort to refine the spiritual qi before she could use it for her own use. But here, the spiritual qi was completely pure. It was all Xiantian spiritual qi. There was no need to refine it, it was all the essence. If she were to compare the purity of the spiritual qi here, it was possible that the spiritual qi in her body was slightly inferior. It had only been a few days since he came here, but he had never leaped to the 4th grade. It was a leap of nearly 20 levels. Although this kind of low-level mystical beast did not require a lot of energy to advance, and it did not require a huge amount of spiritual qi like a high-level mystical beast, this kind of speed of advancement was something that had never been seen in the Tian-Fa forest for tens of thousands of years. To put it in a more advanced way, it wouldn't be so fast even if they were riding on a rocket. Even the previous generations of Tian-Fa's Saint Kings would be flabbergasted if they saw such a terrifying rate of improvement. Gently stretching her body, Mei Shuiyan looked at the Hongjun pagoda, which had already calmed down. Like a wisp of smoke, she climbed up a small tree beside her and stared at the door of the pagoda, waiting for Jun and Mo Xia to come out of seclusion. Right at this moment, Jun Moxie's leisurely voice was heard. I use my eyes to see creation. I use my heart to split open the clear sky. When Mei Shuiyan heard this, she immediately became spirited. This familiar voice calmed her heart, and she suddenly felt warm and touched. This kind of feeling was really good, really good. As these words came out, Mei Shuiyan seemed to feel that there was something in her heart, a faintly discernible kind of comprehension. A white shadow flashed, and Jun Moxie floated down in front of her, smiling at her. Hey, you must be anxious from waiting, right? Mei Shuiyan blinked her eyes, tilted her head, and did not look at him. Jun Moxie was just about to reach out and hug her, but she disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Her snow-white figure moved in and out of the Hongjun pagoda like a bolt of lightning, her speed extremely fast. Squatting on the ground far away, she rolled her eyes at Jun Moxie. Humph, you still want to take advantage of me? How could it be so easy? Even if I can't beat you, and I can't bear to bite you, I'm still so fast that you won't be able to catch me. Jun Moxie laughed heartily, but he was not in a hurry to chase after her. Squatting on the ground, he chuckled. You still want to run now? Humph, when you're done, I'll carry you to bed. Let's see how you can run then. A look of embarrassment appeared in Mei Shuiyan's eyes, and she covered her face with her hands. Even her snow-white little tail was hidden under her body. Jun Moxie laughed heartily and dashed out. The moment he came out, Jun Moxie was stunned for a moment. In the burial ground of Qi Tianfeng and the other two, a black-robed man was sitting there quietly, as if he was a statue, sitting there silently, not moving at all. It was the demon pupil saint, Lung Tong. Lung Tong did not seem to be surprised by Jun Moxie's sudden appearance. He said indifferently, So you haven't left yet? Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at him cautiously. Do you know me? Lung Tong smiled faintly, but there was an indescribable pain on his face. His eyes were even more profound, like a bottomless abyss, completely unable to reflect any emotions in his heart. He could only say bitterly, I guess you don't know, but 3 days ago, I personally witnessed the battle between the 5 of you. He paused and raised his head to look at Jun Moxie. Right here. I saw them being killed by you with my own eyes. As he said the last sentence, his voice suddenly wavered, as if he was trying to suppress the crazed excitement in his heart. I see. Jun Moxie frowned and took a deep breath. His voice was heavy as he said, I wonder why Saint Lung has been waiting here all this while. I didn't make a move that day, and I won't make a move now either. The reason why I'm staying here is not because I'm waiting for you. Lung Tong shook his head slowly, a trace of sorrow in his eyes. I'm only here because my brothers are below. I want to guard their graves for 7 days. That's all. This is also the only thing that I, Lung Tong, can do. Since Saint Lung is so straightforward, I won't say any more words of condolences. I was the one who killed them, so it would be too hypocritical of me to say such things. I admit that I'm not a good person, but I'm also not a vile person. June Mo said casually. I'm sure Saint Lung knows why I wanted to kill them. Everyone knows the ins and outs of this matter. If Saint Lung doesn't intend to take revenge for your brothers, then I'll take my leave. Lung Tong sat quietly, his head lowered as he looked at the ground. Langling said, this matter is the Holy Land's fault. I can't find a reason to take revenge for them, so my brothers are dead. I, Lung Tong, am not someone who can't differentiate right from wrong. I'm not someone who can't differentiate right from wrong, nor do such despicable things. Furthermore, this lowly life of mine can't die before the war for seizing the heavens. It's not worth it to die in your hands. He paused for a moment and turned his head. Furthermore, all of you are going to participate in the war for seizing the heavens, and you're only 18 years old, but you already have this level of cultivation. Your future is limitless. I believe that you'll have a longer life than us. He sucked in a deep breath and said bitterly, perhaps we'll need you to carry the burden in the next war for seizing the heavens. Although I'm stupid, I can still see the big picture clearly. He raised his head and looked at June Moxie. So, no matter what, I will not be your enemy anymore. 7 days later, I'll set off for the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I'll wait quietly for the war for seizing the heavens a year and 7 months later. From now on, Lung Tong, will have nothing to do with me. June Moxie nodded deeply. Since that's the case, I wish you a safe journey. Perhaps we'll meet again a year and a half later, and we'll have the chance to fight side by side. Lung Tong didn't reply to June Moxie's words. He slowly turned his back to June Moxie and muttered to himself, the Saint Kings of the 3 Holy Lands might be able to see the bigger picture, but Mo Wudao will definitely not let off the person who killed his younger brother. Illusory Blood Seas Huyen Aobua is also not someone who will be at a disadvantage. After this matter, who knows how much more carnage there will be. It's best to avoid it. The 3 Holy Lands don't know about this matter yet, but they won't be able to hide it for too long. Sooner or later, they'll find out. There's not much time left. After saying this, Lung Tong lowered his head and didn't make another sound. June Moxie stood silently for a while before sighing. Thank you for the reminder. Take care. He cupped his fists and disappeared like a shooting star. Beneath the cliff, beside the mound of earth, Lung Tong continued to sit quietly. The cold wind blew against his robes, making a rustling sound. His entire person seemed to have become one with the mound of earth where the 4 saints were buried. It was hard to tell if he was sad or desolate. From the conversation with Lung Tong, June Moxie understood that he'd already been in the Hongjun Pagoda for 3 days and 3 nights. June Moxie muttered to himself. Chun Chong and the rest hadn't spread any news, and Lung Tong obviously hadn't reported it to the Holy Lands. That meant that he still had some buffer time. If he used this as a basis, then it would take at least half a month for the 3 Holy Lands to confirm the news and send people over again. In this half a month, he could make all the arrangements he wanted. However, the matter of dealing with the Tianxiang imperial family had to be expedited. If he delayed it any longer, he might really not have the time to deal with it. On the way here, June Moxie had already felt that his original Xianqi cultivation had truly disappeared. However, this didn't mean that he'd lost his martial arts. Instead, what replaced it was another mysterious power. This power might not be stronger than the Xianqi he'd used before, but it was extremely flexible. It could be soft or hard. This seemed to be a new starting point. Although there wasn't any significant improvement in his martial arts, his meridians had undergone earth-shattering changes. He'd completely changed from a shotgun to a cannon. If the original spirit qi was ordinary cotton thread, then this faintly discernible purple qi would be the heavenly worm's silk. Chapter 775. June Moxie could already imagine how strong he would be if his meridians were to be filled with this strange purple qi. However, he would need to accumulate this qi bit by bit. Although he didn't know when the next breakthrough would be, Jun Moxie could vaguely guess that he would need to wait until the purple chi in his meridians was filled to a certain extent before he would be able to reach the edge of the next breakthrough. The breakthrough from the 5th to the 6th level shouldn't be as short as the previous 5 levels. This would be a relatively long process of accumulation. Everything would depend on his future opportunities. When Jun Moxie returned to Tianxiang City, he was astonished to find that the entire city was in a mess. After asking around, he found out that the second prince's subordinates had thrown the entire city into chaos in the past 3 days. Under Li Yuren's arrangements, a few warriors from the second prince's residence coincidentally met the first prince's advisors in a restaurant at noon 2 days ago. Both parties coincidentally gathered in the same restaurant for a drink. Then, the second prince's warriors coincidentally got drunk. One of them wiped his nose in a drunken stupor and coincidentally flung it into the delicious fish soup on the table of the first prince's aides. Therefore, the advisors were furious. They argued for what was right and talked nonsense. The two sides naturally clashed. The warriors were naturally not as good at talking as the advisors, but if they couldn't talk, they could use their swords. They directly drew their swords against each other. Then, the first prince's 7 advisors died under the blades of the second prince's warriors. The first prince was furious when he heard the news. How could he leave the matter at that? He brought his subordinates to find the second prince to settle the score. Both sides talked for a while, but somehow, the discussion broke down. Then, nearly 1,000 warriors started fighting, and blood dyed the entire city red. Even the first prince was not spared, and a few of his teeth were knocked out. How could he swallow this humiliation? Therefore, he went to the emperor to lodge a complaint. In the end, the second prince went crazy. When he entered the palace to confront the emperor, he suddenly pulled out his sword and stabbed his own elder brother with a single stab, leaving a gaping hole on both sides. Naturally, this matter wasn't over yet, because this reality show is happening right in front of the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. The two princes killing each other made their father so angry that he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. On the spot, he ordered that the second prince be demoted to a commoner and thrown into prison. His eldest son was stabbed to death by his second son with a sword, and it happened right in front of him. How could he bear the tragedy of his family? On the other hand, the third prince, who had received this news, was very happy. Needless to say, his second brother had stabbed his eldest brother to death. This was great. These two enemies were finished. He heard that his father was also very angry. The throne of the monarch was definitely not going to run away, and he immediately celebrated without restraint. The third prince was not the only one celebrating that day. On the same night, Li Yuran led the troops and stormed into the prison to rescue the second prince. A group of people returned to the imperial residence and began to drink and celebrate. Apart from being absurd, there was also a hint of evil in this whole matter. On the same night, all the forces under the second prince's command came out in full force. With the help of a group of strong and mysterious helpers, they easily wiped out the forces under the first prince's command. Among them were a few families and a dozen or so officials. They were slaughtered until blood flowed freely. Coincidentally, on that same night, the general of the garrison army in the capital city mysteriously disappeared. The heads of the several camps were also nowhere to be found. This directly caused the imperial bodyguards to be without a leader. Therefore, the second prince's bloody plan, which was not at all brilliant, went exceptionally smoothly. It was not until a day later that they found more than 10 corpses in an inconspicuous little well in the imperial palace. They were all the corpses of the various commanders of the imperial bodyguards. The little well was actually clogged up to the point where the water was overflowing. After personally witnessing his own sons killing each other and staining the palace with blood, the emperor finally made up his mind and announced that the third prince, Yangzhe, would be the crown prince. He also issued an imperial edict summoning all the forces in Tianxiang to surround and kill the second prince. A fierce battle immediately broke out in the capital. However, the war this time had made His Majesty even more disheartened. The few big families had all chosen to stand by and watch. The The Morong family had all resigned long ago. Those who insisted on not resigning were chased out of the family. The entire family was now preparing to move out of the capital and return to their hometown to enjoy their old age. Rescue the emperor? That was something that the officials of the court should do. What did it have to do with commoners like us? The Song family shut their doors. The Li family's grand preceptor, Li, openly stood on the second prince's side because of his grandson, Li Yuran. The Duga family's doors were wide open, but not a single person came out. They were all watching the show. There was no way they could not watch the show. The 9 generals in the family had all fallen sick. Only one of them could come out now. There was no need to mention the Jun family. Old Master Jun Tian had already resigned a long time ago. All the disputes in Tianxiang had nothing to do with him. As for the Meng clan, which had always been on the same side as the first prince, they were immediately exterminated. It was said that the entire clan, not even a dog, could escape. Old man Tang Wanli was loyal to his friends and gathered all the soldiers to help. However, they were intercepted halfway, and Old man Tang was seriously injured. He fell unconscious and was rescued by the aristocratic hall's head shopkeeper, Tianxiang's fortune god Tang Yuan. None of the aristocratic families that supported the imperial power could be of any use. All of the generals had disappeared at the same time. The emperor, who had no other choice, decided to personally lead the army into battle and fight to the death with his own son. As a result, an extremely strange scene unfolded in the capital. The second prince, who was originally the weakest among them, seemed to have an unprecedented increase in his strength. He was actually able to fight evenly with the royal guards who represented the Tianxiang imperial family. In fact, Li Yuran had even managed to gain the upper hand under his strategical maneuvers in the middle of the battle. The third prince, who had just woken up from his hangover, finally arrived with his troops. Together with his imperial father, they joined hands to deal with his second brother. Only then did they manage to suppress the second prince. But they were unable to break into the second prince's residence. The 3 sides fell into a stalemate. The entire capital was filled with thick smoke. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. At this time, Jun Moxie finally returned to the Jun residence. Old Master Jun and Jun Wui were looking into the distance from the tall tower in the residence. Old Master Jun frowned. He was somewhat worried. Jun Wui, on the other hand, looked like he was watching a play. Both father and son had different expressions on their faces. The capital has been very lively these days. Jun Moxie smiled faintly as he walked into the tall tower. Humph. Lively, right? But if you say that you're not behind all this old man will never believe it. Grandpa Jun looked at his grandson hatefully. Only you could come up with such a sinister plan. What does this have to do with me? I have not been in the capital for the past few days. Even if I was in the capital, I am not familiar with any of them. I am being wronged. Jun Moxie had an innocent look on his face. Maybe the father and son are tired of playing games and want the father and son to personally go into battle for fun. That is reasonable. Third uncle, don't you think so? There are all kinds of people in this world. In order to consolidate their power, in order to obtain power, there is nothing that they cannot do. Jun Wui smiled helplessly. That is true. What else can a father and son not do? Power overturns the world. My desire is indeed enough to cover up my conscience. Jun Tian blew his beard. You little brat, stop talking nonsense. Look, our country is about to perish. Brothers killing each other, father and son killing each other. You call this a game? This is a game you are playing, right? Don't worry, grandfather. Tianxiang Kingdom will definitely not perish. How can I, as a son, destroy the country that my father protected back then? It will definitely not perish. Jun Moxie smiled mischievously as he walked over to Grandpa Jun's back. Diligently massaging his shoulders, he said. However, the culprit who harmed my father is delusional enough to sit on the throne and live a free and unfettered life. Grandpa, such a good show is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Let us enjoy it. Then you 2 little brats can slowly enjoy it. This old man is old and tired. I am going to sleep now. Don't look for me if there is something, and don't look for me if there is nothing. Old Master Jun went down angrily. You did it, right? Jun Wui turned his head and looked at his nephew. Actually, it really can't be considered as my doing. At most, I just gave him a few reminders and did not do anything else. Jun Moxie laughed and winked. Third uncle, these few days, have you been happy? Third Master Jun's face turned red, and he said with a straight face, What happy? This is simply ridiculous. Don't interrupt. I am serious here. I'm being serious. That this you've done everything you should have done, right? Jun Mo-sia asked humbly. Done what? What nonsense are you spouting? Are you asking for a beating? Jun Wui's face turned red, and he avoided his nephew's strange gaze guiltily. He forcefully put on the demeanor of an elder and scolded. Don't talk nonsense. If you talk nonsense again, be careful that third uncle will teach you a lesson. Third uncle. Jun Moxie put on a straight face and said earnestly. It is not good to live together before marriage. Even if you don't mind, does third aunt not mind? Even if third aunt doesn't mind, this kind of behavior will have a great impact on the younger generation. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. It turns out that I have been naughty since I was young because of your influence. Today, I have finally found the root of my problem. Third Master Jun stared at him and said angrily, Good boy, you still dare to speak such nonsense. You have been a debauchee since you were young. What does that have to do with me? I've always been upright and plain-spoken, and I'm unyielding and unyielding. Unlike you, an adult, who does not have a proper posture when standing or sitting. Every time I see you, I want to beat you up. Now that you have become capable, do you think that third uncle does not dare to teach you a lesson? No matter how capable you are still my nephew. Chapter 776. Jun Wui's face turned red. He gritted his teeth and said, Little bastard, do you really want to get beaten up? Jun Moxie laughed and said, Third uncle, what is my third aunt doing now? She can't be with you all day, right? Jun Wui revealed a gentle look in his eyes as he said, She doesn't have time to deal with me right now. She's wholeheartedly taking care of those children. She has invited famous doctors from all over the world. Then she told me that she intends to build a big base to take care of those poor children who are stranded in the world. It doesn't matter if they're children of soldiers or refugees. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh of relief and said, Third aunt is really a good person. His eyes flashed and said, However, third uncle, I'm afraid this matter can only be carried out after a while. You better be prepared. We must move in the near future. Leave Tianxiang City. Jun Wui was shocked and said, Why? Leave Tianxiang City? To where? Is this necessary? It is absolutely necessary. We must move to the Tian Fa forest as soon as possible. Jun Moxie took a deep breath and said, I came here today to discuss this matter with you. Jun Wui's face became serious and said, For the 3 holy lands? Yes. Only there will be relatively safe. Jun Mo-sia sucked in a deep breath and furrowed his brows. The 3 holy lands lost 9 venerables and 600 experts in the snowy mountains. And this time in Tianxiang City, none of the 9 saints returned. This hatred is too big, and there is no room for reconciliation. I may have the ability to protect myself, but I don't have the ability to protect the entire family. If the 3 holy lands come again, then I'm afraid their way of doing things will not be the same as before. Although the situation was serious before, it was not to the point of no return. However, after suffering such a huge loss this time, if they make any moves, they will definitely not look down on us anymore. When that time comes, I'm afraid that either you or I will die. Our Jun family will suffer heavy casualties. Jun Moxie said helplessly, Therefore, in order to avoid casualties on our side, we must retreat. Retreat into the Tian Fa forest. In fact, this is the only place where I can feel more at ease. If it's really that serious, not only will we have to retreat, I'm afraid the Dugu family, Duanmu family, Sikong family, and Dongfang family will also have to retreat. Jun Wui said resolutely, The 3 Holy Lands will not spare our June family, but these few families are also targets for their revenge. If something happens to them, how can we, uncle and nephew, feel at ease? June Moxie let out a long sigh and said, "Third uncle, it's too late." The only thing they could do now was to transfer the important people to Tian Fa. As long as the important people leave, with the arrogance of the 3 Holy Lands, no matter how unbearable they will not lay their hands on ordinary people. If that's the case, then I'll immediately go find Brother Duanmu and Brother Sikong to discuss this matter. Jun Wu-yi spoke in a resolute and decisive manner. "Mo Xie, you'll be in charge of arranging the Xian beasts. There's no time to lose. Since you've decided to retreat, then retreat as soon as possible, the sooner the better." Jun Moxie smiled and said, "Third uncle, please rest assured, I've already made arrangements for Bear Mountain and the rest of the Xian Beast Kings. We'll wait for your side to finish discussing, then we will immediately move. We must evacuate all the important people in the first batch. After that, we will quickly build a base in the Tian Fa forest. Only then will we be able to better fight against the 3 Holy Lands. At least, we won't be under the threat of being overturned at any time." Jun Moxie said with great fascination. He had already thought that although Mei Shuiyan could not come out for the time being, and was not willing to come out in a non-human form, if she knew that she had returned to the Tian Fa forest, she would still be very happy. Jun Wui nodded and said, "There's no time to lose. I will go and make arrangements now." As he said that, his figure flashed and disappeared. Third Master Jun was an understanding person. He clearly understood that this was not a normal time, and there might be a sudden attack from a powerful enemy at any time. Since they had already decided to retreat, then they had to be swift and decisive, and not the slightest bit of delay. At this moment, only Jun Moxie was left on top of the tower. Facing the billowing smoke in the city, Jun Dashao suddenly felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart, or perhaps frustration. These inexplicable and subtle feelings came from his heart, his emotions. He had teased Jun Wu-yi, but it had evoked his own feelings. He was already 18 years old, and he was about to face the matter of marriage and family right now. Jun Moxie's heart was a little conflicted. As a man, he would naturally have thoughts when he saw a beautiful woman, and Jun Moxie was no exception. Not to mention Guan Qinghan, whose body and mind belonged to him, and Duga Xiaoi, who was already engaged by the 2 old men of the 2 families. Guan Qinghan was gentle and stubborn, cold and solemn, and beautiful like a fairy. Duga Xiaoi was lively and playful, cute and adorable, and her looks were 1 in a million. However, Jun Moxie was surprised to find that during this period of time, he had not thought about them at all. But he had placed all his heart and soul on Mei Shuiyan. Jun Moxie also knew that this was undoubtedly unfair to Guan Qinghan and Duga Xiaoi. Duga Xiaoi, from the time he was a debauchee, had a unique insight and had taken a liking to him at first sight. For him, she had spared no effort to fight for him. Although some things were a little absurd and even led to a lot of unexpected changes, this little girl's heart was firmly tied to him, and this was an indisputable fact that no one could deny. Jun Moxie saw it in his eyes and remembered it in his heart. In the face of such feelings, how could Jun Moxie be indifferent? And Guan Qinghan's sacrifice for the Jun family was also obvious to all. She would rather give up her life for the Jun family, and not just once. In order to save his life, she didn't even hesitate to sacrifice her chastity. In the face of such a woman, how could Jun Moxie not be moved and not cherish her? But sometimes a person was such a contradiction. Jun Moxie clearly knew all this, and he also knew that these 2 women were destined to be with him in this life. But in his heart, there was still a touch of guilt. Whether it was for Mei Shuiyan, Guan Qinghan, or Duga Xiaoi, they were all like this. A man could not fall in love with 2 women at the same time, because there was always only one true love. As long as one fell in love, it would be inseparable for a lifetime, or even for eternity. Jun Moxie's love for Mei Shuiyan was real. For Guan Qinghan, it was appreciation and responsibility. For Dugashawi, it was pity, love, and a responsibility. They all had feelings. Or it was a common problem of men ambiguity. It was undeniable that if Guanqing Han or Dugashawi left now, Jun Moxie would not be able to accept it either. He would be furious. He would be sad. But if Mei Shuiyan left, it would completely break his heart, and he would go completely crazy. Men, amen, am I also a man who can't escape from vulgarity? Jun Moxie smiled bitterly as he analyzed his strange state of mind, but the more he analyzed, the more confused he became. For the first time, he felt that being a man with 3 wives and 4 concubines was actually very tiring, and not all of it was happiness. Am I still a fucking determined killer? Jun Moxie smiled bitterly and asked himself, would an assassin, especially a king of assassins, be like me? It seemed that no one could answer this question. Because men and women were the same, they were also creatures born with extreme contradictions. Even the most loyal man would take a second look at a beautiful woman on the street. The love of beauty was something that everyone had. Since there was no answer after thinking hard, then he would just let nature take its course. Jun Moxie slowly walked down the tower, his heart in a mess, and it was difficult to sort it out. For the first time in his life, he did not dare to face his own feelings, and it was the first time he was so passive. By the time Jun and Mo Xia arrived at the meeting hall, Jun Wu Yi had already gathered everyone together, and everyone was in the middle of a discussion. Solitary Eagle and Foam Wanyan were originally roaming the pugilistic world, and they did not care much about where the Jun family would move to. What really surprised Jun Moxie was the opinions of the Dongfang family, Duanmu family, and Xikong family. The Dongfang Wenqing directly expressed the most resolute rejection of the decision to move the entire family to the Tian Fa forest. Third brother, your suggestion is not appropriate. Although the Jun family has the reputation of being a super family, there are still very few of us. If we say we want to move to the Tian Fa forest, we will move. We, the Dongfang family, have finally broken our oath, and we want to take this opportunity to regain our former glory. Why would we hide in the Tian Fa forest? Let's not talk about anything else. That place is still the territory of the Tian Fa beasts. We can talk about friendship with the Beast Kings, but it is impossible for the Dongfang family to seek shelter in the Tian Fa forest. Moreover, the 3 Holy Lands have a grudge with the Jun family, and it is difficult to turn the situation around, but there is no direct relationship with the Dongfang family. Mo Wudao may be narrow-minded, but he is still a master of his generation. He will not take out his anger on a worldly family like us. Therefore, we, the Dongfang family, will not retreat. Dongfang Wendao and Dongfang Wenjian also had the same opinion. What was even more unexpected to Jun Moxie was that Xikong and Yi and Duanmu Chao Fen also had the same opinion. The Jun family will bear the brunt of the attack, so there is nothing wrong with retreating. But there is no need for our 2 families to do so. After all, the 3 Holy Lands are also a positive force. If they really take out their anger on us worldly families, then the 3 Holy Lands will not be able to afford to lose face. Therefore, third brother can rest assured. However, we also agree with Mo Xia's opinion. If the Jun family does not retreat, they will inevitably suffer the most bitter revenge of the 3 Holy Lands. Chapter 777. There's no need to discuss this matter anymore. Dongfang Wenqing was displeased. We can't afford to lose the Dongfang family's legacy and reputation. Even if he had to die, he couldn't afford to lose it. Sunrise Dongfang. Only I am undefeated. We are about to create this glory. If we hide in Tian Fa and hide under the wings of the beasts, how can we talk about reviving the Dongfang family? Since they'd already spoken to such an extent, it could be said that they'd come to the end. If they were to force a truce, then they'd really be shedding all pretenses of cordiality. Jun Moxie had no choice but to instruct everyone to be vigilant. Then, he gave them as many healing pills as he could and arranged for many messenger falcons to be used for communication. He also used the subordinates of the Eagle King of the Tian Fa forest. They had to keep each other informed at all times so that they could provide support in case of any changes. The next day, Dongfang Wenqing, Duanmu Chaofan, and the others left Tianxiang and hurried back to their respective families. Junjian Tian went to look for Dugu Zongheng to discuss this matter, but was met with a rebuff. Dugujian Tian was in the middle of drinking when he heard the news brought by Grandpa Jun. He could not help but stare blankly for a long time. Then he waved his hand and said, "You go, I won't go. The Dugu family is not going anywhere." Junjian Tian had known him for a lifetime, so how could he not understand what he was thinking? He didn't try to persuade him any further. He sighed and silently got up to leave. Dugu Zongheng silently looked at Junjian Tian's back. Junjian Tian was about to walk out of the door when Dugu Zongheng suddenly said in a low voice, "Tell your grandson to treat my granddaughter well. That is the treasure of the Dugu family. If he mistreats him, I'll kill him." Junjian Tian stood in silence for a while. Then he let out a long sigh and walked away, leaving behind only a few words, "I'll leave the people of Tianxiang to you." Dugu Zongheng watched him walk away. Then he suddenly raised his head and gulped down a big bowl of wine. He muttered, "Grand Supreme Elder, you understand me best. I, Dugu Zongheng, have never been a person who longs for power. Those few brats at home are also not good at scheming. But the two main pillars of the Tianxiang kingdom's military have protected Tianxiang for 60 years. Tianxiang kingdom does not only have an emperor, there are also hundreds of millions of common people. Your Jun family will certainly leave. But what will they do if the Dugu family also leaves? How can this old man bear to see the people plunge into misery and suffering? We, the 9 men of the Dugu family, still have to hold up the rivers and mountains for the billions of people. It doesn't matter whether I appreciate it or not." In short, this is one of the few things that I, Dugu Zongheng, have in my life. As for the imperial family, when have I ever placed the imperial family's glory, splendor, and wealth in my eyes? Dugu Zongheng slumped down on the table after he finished speaking. The wine bowl fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. However, he was still muttering to himself, "Heroes rush forward. How can the heroes of our Dugu family retreat at such a precarious time?" He could only charge forward. Charge forward, otherwise, the whole of Tianxiang will be a scene of desolation and flames of war. We can't go. The Jun family was busy preparing for the evacuation. Only Grandpa Jun was sitting alone on the Jun family's tower. He was lost in thought as he looked outside. Tianxiang City. Every brick, every tile, every blade of grass. It seemed as if he could not see enough. This is the place that this old man and his family have guarded for a lifetime. For this place, this old man has fought on horses and spears and escaped from death hundreds of times. For this place, Wu Hui stood up without hesitation and transformed into a god of war to fight on the battlefield. The wind and moon on the other side of the mountain pass, the cold wind of the desert, the hooves of the horses on the grasslands, and the whistling of the banners. Who in the Jun family had not experienced this? Grandpa Jun looked on quietly, and his eyes slowly filled with sparkling tears. 2 lines of tears slowly flowed down his cheeks and hung on his snow-white beard. Then, they dripped down to the ground, drop after drop from youth to old age. How many brothers had turned into bones in front of his eyes? How many good men had fought under his leadership, and their corpses had been buried on the battlefield? His own sons and grandsons had spilled their blood on this piece of land. The gleam of swords still flashed in front of his eyes, and the majestic and sorrowful bugle horn still rang in his ears. The eyes of his brothers before they died were still in his heart, and the cries of death still reverberated in his chest. Big Brother Jun. Big Brother Jun. Junjian Tian fiercely closed his eyes, and his old face twitched. He lowered his head and tightly closed his eyes. Only his shoulders trembled slightly. Can't bear to. Really can't bear to, but now, I'm finally going to leave. This place has obviously left me with countless tears of blood and countless regrets. But why does my heart feel so sour when I think about leaving? A hero fights 100 battles lightly, and a warrior never looks back. The winds of an iron horse break the ice river, and the blood of the dreaming soul saber thickens. Jun Tian was almost choking with sobs as he recited this poem. This was a poem that he would often recite loudly with his old brothers while wiping the blood off their swords. Now, how many people still remember it? Jun Tian's tears flowed down his face, but he gritted his teeth and said each word in a sobbing voice. Brothers, I really have to leave. Leave this place where your heroic souls are. If you miss me, I hope to meet you in my dreams. This staunch old man did not cry when his son died, nor did he cry when his grandson died. But today, he could not help but shed tears of emotion. Because he was about to leave this land that he loved so deeply, the land that he had spent his entire life watering. Even though this land had let him down, even though the imperial power of this land had harmed him, taking away his son and framing his grandson, but this land was still something that Jun Tian had fought through hundreds of battles to obtain. The entire Jun family had gone through many hardships to protect it. Humans are not plants. How can they be emotionless? At this point, he had no choice but to leave. Because if he insisted on not leaving, Jun Wui and Jun Moxie would definitely not leave either. If that happened, the Jun family would truly be finished. 2 of his sons and grandsons had already died for this land. Would his last son and grandchild also be buried in this land? No. Absolutely not. So he had to leave. Even though he was reluctant to leave, but now, he had to be responsible for his family. Jun Emosia was alone. His green robes fluttered in the wind as he strolled along the desolate street. He was walking in the direction of the battle cries, neither too fast nor too slow. His demeanor was very leisurely, and his steps were relaxed. But the interval between each step was surprisingly consistent. He walked very attentively, and even very solemnly, because the end of the road was the end of the feud. The blood debt of the white general Jun Wu Hui, the death of the iron blood god of war Jun Wu Meng, the lives of his 2 brothers Mo Yu and Mo Cho, and the 10 years of his mother's sleep. Today, he would take revenge from the main culprit. All the price. Today, the Jun family had decided to leave. So, Jun Moxie would definitely not do anything that would cause trouble. No matter what, today, the feud was settled. The second prince was indeed cooperative, and Li Yuran was also nimble enough to settle one of them in such a short period of time, and even caused such a huge commotion. So, since it's like this, it's better to be on time than to be on time. I might as well use this auspicious day to settle the past. All the feud will end today. I, the only descendant of the Jun family, will personally take revenge. From now on, the Jun family will have no more regrets. Not for generations to come. Tianxiang Main Street. Countless houses had been torn down. The once bustling streets and residential areas had turned into battlefields for both sides. In this place that wasn't very big, there were nearly 30 to 40,000 people shouting and fighting. Blood flowed everywhere, and limbs flew in all directions. There were people who fell to the ground due to injuries, or died a violent death. A moment ago, they were still shouting and fighting, but in the next moment, they had already turned into corpses that still had body temperature. The logisticians were constantly rushing forward to rescue the injured on their side. But those who were at the center of the battle could only accept their bad luck. That was not a place where non-combatants could easily set foot. On the emperor's side, the emperor of Tianxiang was extremely awe-inspiring. He was clad in a golden helmet and armor, and was riding a snow-white divine warhorse. He held a 3-feet-long sword in his hand, and had personally led the troops into battle. He had sworn to kill his own son. Behind him was the third prince, Yang Zhe. His face was also impassioned, and he did not fear death. However, there were only 40 to 50 people beside him, raising their shields to protect him. It looked like this third prince was also very afraid of death. In front of them, far away, the second prince was riding a fiery red steed. He was circling back and forth, like a donkey going back and forth on a grinder. His spittle was flying everywhere, and his face was ferocious. Kill. 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 Kill for this prince. Kill those two sons of B** cheese. This prince will definitely reward them handsomely. When this prince ascends to the throne, all of you will be loyal subjects who founded the country. Glory, wealth, high positions, and generous salaries will be within your reach. If we succeed in this battle, our glory will shine for generations to come. On the high walls of the second prince's residence, there was actually a chair suspended in the air. This chair was tied to two large trees on both sides with two ropes. It was at least a few dozen zhang above the ground, and the person sitting on it was young Masterly Yuran. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and he held a feather fan in his hand. He was smiling and talking freely, and his expression was relaxed. He really did look like the beautiful Zhou Lang of the Three Kingdoms. As he spoke and laughed, the oars were turned to ashes. Li Yuran's eyes were sharp as he observed the situation of the battle. He was calm and unruffled. He waved the fan in his hand to the left, and the messenger on the left raised the small flag in his hand and waved it. In the midst of the battle, a bugle horn sounded from the second prince's side, and the battle formation would change accordingly. From time to time, he would wave it to the right, and another change would occur. Jun Moxie smiled as he watched this scene quietly. He suddenly realized that the second prince's military strength was at an absolute disadvantage. However, under the command of Li Yuran, as the battle formation changed continuously, the entire battlefield had turned into a meat grinder. Both sides had casualties, but the emperor's side had the most casualties. They were outnumbered, and it was not impossible to turn the tables. Jun Moxie could even be sure that this strange situation had been deliberately created by Li Yuran. Chapter 778. More importantly, up until now, the Li family's troops had yet to participate in this battle. It should be known that Grand Preceptor Li's forces, which had been accumulated over the years, might not have many experts, but for an ordinary army, they were definitely the elites of the elites. If they joined the battle, it would definitely lead to a decisive change. At the very least, it would not cause the second prince's side to sink into such a bitter battle, with the possibility of being overturned at any time. Although the emperor's side would certainly have other backup plans, Li Yuran's main goal in controlling this battle was to cause as much chaos as possible in the capital city, to create as much trouble as possible. The bigger the better. He was already as certain as a mountain in his heart. In any case, Jun Moxie would come out to clean up the mess in a while. This battle before him, he would just take it as watching the show. No matter how many died, he, the great young Masterly, would not care. It would be best if all of them died. This Li Yuran is really a talent. Jun Moxie sighed and murmured, "You are a beauty. How can you become a thief?" He raised his eyes to look in the direction of the Prince Equivalent's residence, thinking about the little rascal Yang Mo's appearance, but in his heart, he was thinking, "This Li Yuran, should I keep him alive? If I keep him alive, is it good or bad? Such a talent. To kill is really a pity, but if I keep him alive in this world, apart from me, who else can control Li Yuran's shocking talent and peerless schemes? Yang Mo, can he do it?" Facing the slaughter of thousands of soldiers and horses, Jun Moxie only minded his own business, as if the slaughter in front of him was not worth watching, and he did not care about it at all. The murderous aura and the waves of shouts, accompanied by the early spring wind, blew across his forehead, and a few strands of his long hair fluttered in the wind, revealing his slightly furrowed brows. At this moment, Jun Moxie looked somewhat melancholic, like a youth who is ignorant of the world, facing the spring flowers, the autumn moon, and the flowing river, inexplicably worrying. Long live! Hooray! At this moment, a roar rang out on the battlefield like a tsunami. Jun Moxie calmly raised his head to look. It was the emperor, who had not been able to take down the enemy after attacking for a long time, holding a long sword in his hand and riding his horse into the battlefield. The guards behind him were afraid that something would happen to him and quickly followed. The emperor was personally leading the army into battle. This was undoubtedly a huge boost to the morale of the army. The imperial army's eyes were practically bloodshot as they pounced forward as if they did not care about their own lives. As the saying went, when a general risked his life, he would be invincible against 10,000 men. Right now, it was not just one general risking his life. For a period of time, the pressure on the second prince's side increased by several folds. Even if they had the support of a superior formation, Li Yuren's brilliant commands would not be enough. The third prince, who was surrounded and protected by the crowd, saw that his side had gained the upper hand and the second prince's side was starting to lose ground. He immediately became spirited and shouted, "Bring the drums. This crown prince wants to personally beat the drum and cheer for Imperial Father. I hope that Imperial Father is wise and mighty and can kill that heinous rebel Yongdan in one fell swoop." Very quickly, a subordinate brought over a large drum. The third prince flung his cloak and walked forward valiantly. He took the drumsticks and began to beat the drum like a storm. It was actually quite rhythmic. It looked like the rumors that this crown prince usually beat the drum and did kuju naked for his wives and concubines were not groundless rumors after all. Looking at his vigor today, it was obvious that he had trained for a long time. The drum beat was as dense as raindrops. The surrounding soldiers all shouted, "Your Majesty is mighty. Your Majesty is mighty. Our army will definitely win." The cheers shook the heavens and the earth, as if they had already achieved complete victory, but no one could have imagined that the crown prince was beating the drum and cheering for his imperial father because the emperor had already gone into battle. As the crown prince, it would be inappropriate for him to not go up. But if he went up, this mighty crown prince was simply too afraid of death. That was why he thought of such a compromise. Beating the drum. Although it could boost morale, it was still the rear, and it was the rear. Even an arrow would not be able to hit it. It had to be said that this crown prince could be considered a talented person. At the very least, he was able to come up with an idea in an emergency. The battle at the front of the battlefield was getting more and more intense. Both sides were beating the drums like thunder, banners fluttering in the wind, and there was a sea of people. Right at this moment, something that no one could have imagined happened. The third prince, Yang Jaer, the current crown prince, suddenly threw the drumsticks aside and stood up, his blood boiling. Stretching his neck like a chicken, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl. That howl pierced through the clouds and the sun. As expected, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl, full of vigor and passion. Just as he finished his long howl, he suddenly took large strides forward, walking towards his warhorse with an awe-inspiring demeanor. His gait was vigorous and resolute, sonorous and powerful. His back was straight, and his legs were as wide as possible as he walked in a straight catwalk, displaying the imposing demeanor of a crown prince. Everyone who saw this couldn't help but praise in their hearts. This is our crown prince. Look, how valiant he is, how unafraid of death. How heroic, What is going on here? What kind of statement is this? The crown prince was full of vigor as he flipped onto the back of his warhorse. Suddenly, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, he pulled out his horsewhip and lashed it viciously on the warhorse's rump. With a loud roar, his usual duck-like voice sounded especially heroic at this moment. This crown prince is going. A man should die for his country. Why must he return with his body wrapped in horse leather? Imperial Father, your asterisk is here. He actually came up with a poem on the spot. And this poem was actually so impassioned that it was enough to be passed down through the ages. As expected of the crown prince who excelled in both the pen and the sword. As expected of the crown prince some people started praising him again, but when they heard the crown prince's last sentence, they were all dumbfounded. Their mouths were wide open, and their faces were filled with shock. Imperial Father, your asterisk is here. What kind of words are these? Don't tell me that your Imperial Father doesn't bring this thing with him normally? Does he even need you to deliver it? If he doesn't, then where did the three of you brothers come from? But if he calls himself that, isn't that a little too out of line? Could it be that this is a form of endearment between father and son? In that instant, everyone's eyes widened and their eyes widened in shock. Other than Jun Dashao, There was no one else who could have orchestrated such a strange scene. Speaking of which, the appearance of this **** was quite a bit of a story. The third prince, Yangzhe, had a zhe character in his name. The less knowledgeable Jun Dashao did not seem to recognize it, and there was no need for him to recognize it either. Thus, he had always separated it and pronounced it as GG. At this moment, he used the soul manipulation technique on the crown prince, but he still used his usual way of addressing the crown prince. Naturally, it was your **** is here. The relatively uncultured Jun Dashao had actually caused the new crown prince of Tianxiang to become such a huge joke in front of so many people, in such a bloody battlefield. Jun Dashao felt a little apologetic in his heart. However, the crown prince had clearly called out GG. As for what others thought of it, it could only be said that these people's thoughts were too impure. This young master need not feel too guilty about it. Besides, he was someone who was about to die anyway. He could call him whatever he wanted. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Just when everyone was in a daze, the crown prince whipped his horse and urged it forward. His eyebrows danced with joy as he charged out from the army of tens of thousands of soldiers with an unstoppable momentum. He took the lead and charged towards his father on the battlefield. At the same time, he continued to shout out, "Imperial father, your little GG is here." In that instant, everyone on both sides of the battlefield stared at each other in shock. Some people even raised their swords in astonishment, forgetting to slash down. Instead, they tilted their heads to look at the crown prince who was madly charging towards them, their faces full of disbelief. Then, the second prince's side was the first to snap out of their daze. Then, they burst into laughter. Each and every one of them clutched their stomachs as tears and snot flowed down their faces. "Your Majesty, it turns out that you've come out to fight, but you're afraid that your precious thing will get hurt. So, you've actually stored it in advance. Your Majesty is truly farsighted. Tianxiang Empire has such a cautious emperor. Why would you need to worry about not being able to accomplish great things? We're all men here. We can understand your way of doing things, haha." The entire battlefield was filled with laughter. There was no distinction between friend or foe. The emperor's face turned green with anger. He wanted to flare up, but who could he flare up at this moment? Who would care about you if you flare up at the other party? Wouldn't it chill the hearts of the soldiers if you flare up at your own people? Left with no other choice, he shouted while trembling, "Evil creature, what nonsense are you spouting?" The crown prince, Yangzhe, had charged over valiantly but ended up eating a hot fart. His face was filled with shock and grievance. "Imperial father, it's me, I'm your little GG, I'm here to help you in battle, Why are you still scolding me? I'm your little GG, you don't want me anymore." Even though Jun Moxie was concealed, he was still laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. However, at this point, the show was more or less done. It was time to draw the curtains. His divine sense pointed at the crown prince's head, and the crown prince suddenly roared with righteous indignation, "Sheep's egg, get your ass over here to die for this old man." This time, he'd directly become his second brother's old man. The emperor was so angry that his eyes and mouth turned crooked. But before the emperor could reprimand him, Crown Prince Yangzhe's roar thundered like thunder as he continued to spew vulgarities from his mouth. At the same time, he whipped his horse and galloped like a dragon. With a leap, he leaped into the battlefield and galloped towards the second prince's side. Whenever the enemies encountered him or stood in his way, they would all fall back. Wherever the hooves of the horses went, it was like a large ship sailing across a calm lake, the waves parting and rolling, forcefully carving out a broad path for him. It was a peerless style of taking the head of a general amidst an army of 10,000. Ayo, His Highness the Crown Prince is mighty. Some of the bootlickers had already begun to cheer loudly. Chapter 779. Just when everyone was feeling relieved, thinking that the Crown Prince's move was too beautiful and too sharp, He only needed to wait for the knife to fall, and the rebel in front of him would bow his head and be executed. This was a huge achievement. If such a brave crown prince were to ascend the throne in the future, he would definitely be a wise ruler. What kind of heroic spirit would be needed to accomplish such a lone hero? The heavens have blessed my Tianxiang to have such a hero. The crown prince will definitely lead the Tianxiang Empire to a more glorious future. Even unifying the continent and destroying all the countries would not be impossible. In that instant, everyone on the emperor's side had their eyes lit up, and their blood was boiling. Some of them had even started to prepare themselves. They took a deep breath and filled their lungs, ready to exhale at any time. As soon as the crown prince's saber fell, they would immediately shout with all their might. The second prince was like a piece of meat on the chopping board. There was no room for escape. Even the emperor, who was in the middle of the battle, had an indescribable look of joy in his eyes. There was even a trace of heartache. Right at this moment, a strange change occurred. The crown prince of Tianxiang, who had been as handsome as a deity, suddenly turned his head and looked around. His expression was abnormally panicked, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He suddenly burst into tears and snot. "Mother, father, why am I here? Don't kill me, second brother, my dearest second brother. I beg you, don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm willing to be your slave. Don't kill me." Following another pu sound, a yellow and white substance flowed down the crown prince's trousers, and the entire battlefield was filled with a foul stench. He was so scared that he had lost control of his bowels, and his bowels were wet. This was really like a yellow river falling from the 9 heavens. The second prince saw his good third brother riding his horse towards him, as if there was no one there. He wanted to dodge, but strangely, he couldn't move his body at all. He was in despair and almost closed his eyes to wait for death. After all, his third brother, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, had taken the lead and rushed in front of him like a hot knife through butter. The second prince only had time to think to himself, "My life is over." He only knew that he was definitely going to die this time. He closed his eyes helplessly, but after waiting for a long time, he heard the crown prince begging for mercy. And why was the person he was begging for mercy me? How is this possible? Shouldn't I be the one begging for mercy? Then, the second prince heard a strange sound, as if a person with diarrhea suddenly ate croton and couldn't hold it anymore. Then, he smelled a stench similar to that of a latrine. The second prince opened his eyes as if he was in a dream. He saw that the crown prince, who had been so majestic a moment ago, was now like the most pitiful worm in the world, looking at him with a pleading expression. His face was deathly still and full of despair, and his face was already red from crying. His entire body was shaking violently like an old sow sifting chaff. What was going on? The second prince blinked, but the crown prince had already rolled down from his horse. He crawled on the ground, his trousers dripping with liquid, leaving a strange yellowish-brown mark on the ground. He raised his head and looked at the second prince. "Second brother." Sob, sob, sob. "My dear second brother, please don't kill me. As long as you let me go, I will never fight with you for the throne. I am willing to do anything for you. Second brother, Your Majesty, please spare my life. Your Majesty, your head." The second prince finally came back to his senses. He thought about how he was so scared by this little bastard that he couldn't even move. He couldn't help but feel hot on his face. Anger rose in his heart, and he became bold. He roared fiercely and pulled out his sword. He jumped off his horse and slashed at the crown prince's head without hesitation. "Aren't you the newly appointed crown prince? Aren't you very powerful? Weren't you very powerful just now? Come on, come on. Why aren't you powerful anymore? Show some more power." As he roared crazily, he raised his sword again and fiercely stabbed it into his brother's heart. Then he pulled it out and stabbed it again. This went on for dozens of times. The crown prince's body was completely like a hornet's nest. His head and limbs were also scattered into pieces. The second prince let out a ferocious roar. Suddenly, he raised his leg and kicked the incomplete body on the ground up into the air. He laughed wickedly. "You little bastard. Are you going to fight with me for the throne again?
Fuck.
I'm going to kill you, you little bastard." In the end, the second prince, who had always been weak, was also panting from exhaustion. But his hands and feet did not stop moving. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was panting like a mad bull. Regardless of friend or foe, everyone stopped fighting at this moment and stared blankly at the scene. In everyone's eyes, there was the same expression: disbelief. Unimaginable. Everyone's eyeballs were popping out. How could something like this happen in this world? God save me. There's something wrong with my eyes. This is something that even the gods can't imagine. How could it happen in front of my eyes? What is going on? Are we dreaming? How can this world be so crazy? At the same time, the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire came back to his senses. His entire body was trembling and twitching. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was wide open. It was as if he couldn't hear anything. It was as if he was watching a silent pantomime. His youngest son, the only one who had the qualifications to inherit his throne, had died tragically in front of his eyes at the hands of his rebellious second son. And he had died without a complete corpse. It was close to a death by 1,000 cuts. He shuddered and finally came to his senses. He felt a tearing pain in his chest. Suddenly, he cried out in a heart-wrenching voice, "Jad, my good son." He could only see stars in front of his eyes. Looking up, the sun was blinding, and he felt dizzy. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale gold. Then his entire body fell off the back of the horse. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The guards beside him were also shocked. They finally came back to their senses and hugged him. And this poor emperor finally fainted among his 3 sons. His eldest son had been killed by his second son right in front of him in the golden imperial hall with a sword through his heart. And now, his youngest son had also died in the hands of his own brother. A tragedy of flesh and blood killing each other. In the short span of 3 days, it had happened twice in front of him. Although Yang Huayu had always been steady, quick-witted, and extremely shrewd, but at the end of the day, he was still a human. This kind of blood was thicker than water. Even in the royal palace, where there were no relatives, it was still suitable. He was still a father. And at this moment, he was a father at the end of his road, a ruler at the end of his rope, a king deserted by his own people. This kind of blow, no matter who it was hard to bear. The imperial camp was in a state of chaos. The awe-inspiring aura from before had disappeared in an instant. On the other hand, the second prince was overjoyed. He laughed wildly and said, "That old bastard finally can't take it anymore. Everyone, charge. No matter who it is, as long as you can chop off that old bastard Yang Huayu's head and bring it to me, I will bestow upon you the title of a duke and grant you a vast land. The title will be hereditary, and the death exemption gold plate will stay in the family forever." Right now, the second prince had already started to refer to himself as I, but the moment this order was given, it was as if a bucket of oil had been poured onto a raging fire. Everyone joined the army for their pay. Who wouldn't want a high position, a high salary, wealth, and splendor? To bestow upon his wife and children, and to be a duke and marquis for 10,000 generations? Furthermore, the second prince had promised to bestow upon them the title of a duke and grant them a vast land. Just this alone was enough to ignite all the blood in their bodies. Not to mention the words that came after that were like thunder from the heavens, hereditary. The death exemption gold plate will stay in the family forever. It was completely crazy, boiling with excitement. Even among the soldiers in the imperial camp, there were many whose eyes were flickering. They were considering if they should take advantage of the chaos to chop off this most valuable head and send it to His Royal Highness the Second Prince. After all, such an opportunity might only come once in their lives. Even if they didn't chop it off, others would. Rather than letting others take advantage of it, why not let them take advantage of it? Once these thoughts surged, It was like a wildfire that could no longer be contained. Many people suddenly turned their heads and looked in the direction of the emperor. Their eyes shone like that of wild beasts. In the next moment, they had already charged forward like a pack of mad dogs. I am not dead yet. Who dares to act rashly? With me here in Tianxiang Empire. Who dares to rebel? Suddenly, a loud roar rang out. The emperor had awoken from his stupor. His eyes were like lightning, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He stood upright on the back of his horse and looked at everyone with disdain. He was still as dignified and solemn as he was in the past. Under the pressure of his aura, the surrounding soldiers did not dare to look him in the eye. All of them quietly took 2 steps back, and some of them even lowered their weapons. Even the second prince could not help but turn pale. The sword in his hand fell to the ground with a clang, and his limbs trembled slightly. When his father's sharp eyes landed on his face, he could not help but panic and avoid his father's gaze. His legs went soft, and he actually took 3 steps back. Yang Dan, do you want to kill me? Yang Huayu slowly dismounted from his horse and stood upright with his hands behind his back. His hawk-like eyes glared fiercely at his son. You killed your eldest brother, and today, you killed your 3rd brother. The 2 of them are your blood brothers. The 3 of you are of the same mother. They are bastards beasts. What are you? And now you still want to kill me? Kill your own father? I am an old tortoise, an old beast. What about you? Answer me. He took a step forward with each question, and the second prince also took a step back with a panicked expression. By the time he finished speaking, he was already 5 steps away from the emperor. The second prince's lips trembled, and his body trembled slightly. His eyes flashed, and his expression was one of panic. The malevolent expression from before had disappeared. This person was his own father. Even though he could kill his own brothers towards his own father, he could not do it and did not dare to do it. What? Yang Huayu, haha, your majesty, what's wrong? Can Yang Dan not kill you? Why can't he kill you? Do you have an extra head or an extra life than him? An elegant voice traveled with the wind. The voice was gentle, and it was neither light nor heavy. It made one feel as if they were bathing in the spring wind. Even though they were in the middle of a bloody battlefield, they still felt a little carefree. Jun Moxie. He had finally appeared at this crucial moment. Chapter 780. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the voice. In the distance, thousands of people parted to form a path. A young man dressed in green walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was filled with a gentle smile, and his expression was relaxed. It was as if he had stepped into his own garden. He casually stepped into the bloody battlefield, like an immortal returning from admiring the moon. The ground was covered in fresh blood, so thick that it could even cover a person's feet. However, this young man walked over casually, and there was not a single speck of blood on his pink boots. He walked over lightly, his steps calm and unhurried. He looked at the soldiers around him, and then at the river of blood beneath his feet. Suddenly, he said in a slow voice, "Since ancient times, emperors have walked a merciless path. So, what if their bloodlines kill each other? When I look at the picturesque mountains, all I see are white bones." As he spoke, he had already walked less than 10 feet away from the emperor of Tianxiang, Yang Huayu. His black and white eyes carried a strange demonic elegance. He tilted his head slightly to look at the emperor, who was at the end of his road. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty is in a good mood. In such a dangerous battle, under the shadow of swords and blades, amidst the rain of blood, you are still able to teach your useless son a lesson with such awe-inspiring righteousness. Truly the heart of a loving father. It makes one envious and praiseworthy. As expected, you are able to do what others are unable to do." He gently shook his head as a desolate expression appeared on his face. He let out a disappointed sigh and said, "It's a pity. I can no longer see my father. He can no longer scold me. As a son, how can I not feel pain in my heart? The tree wishes for peace, but the wind never ceases. The son wishes to be raised, but his parents do not wait for him. Your Majesty, this feeling is really hard to describe. Don't you think so? You've lost 2 sons in a row, and the last son wants to replace his father to ascend the throne. You should be able to vividly understand this commoner's suffering, right? The emperor's eyes revealed a look of hatred. In the depths of his eyes, there was a faint trace of fear and dread. He said bitterly, Jun Moxie, this tragedy is ultimately a matter of the imperial family. What are you doing here? And from what standpoint are you getting involved? Don't tell me, your Jun family hasn't stirred up enough trouble yet? Jun Moxie smiled faintly and said, Your Majesty must be joking. How could that be? Our Jun family, when have we ever caused any trouble? 10 years ago in Tianguanlin, our Jun family had already stopped causing trouble. How would we dare to cause trouble again? His eyelids opened, and 2 sharp rays of light shot out from his black and white eyes. His tone was gentle, but it was heavy as he asked, Your Majesty, do you still remember Jun Wu Hui from that time? The face of the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire was even darker than the bottom of a pot. The muscles on his face twitched, and his eyes grew increasingly gloomy. Don't lie in front of a true person. What are you trying to say? Just say it. As soon as Jun Moxie arrived, the king's imposing manner that the emperor had managed to erupt with great difficulty disappeared in just a few words. In front of Jun Moxie, he seemed a little fearful and guilty. Jun Moxie smiled lightly and said, Your Majesty, why did you lose your temper? You scared this commoner to death. Did Your Majesty ask what this commoner wanted to say? Actually, it's nothing much. I just wanted to ask you, Your Majesty, how does it feel to watch your eldest son, the Crown Prince, get killed in front of your eyes? In the magnificent palace, in the throne room, where the most power is concentrated, to have his heart pierced by a sword? He smiled gently, but there was a sharp glint in his eyes. However, the dead are already dead. If Your Majesty doesn't want to talk about it, then so be it. But what about the murderer of your eldest son, your second son, who is also your biological second son, who became a traitor because of brother 2? How do you feel about that? And today, your third son was once again chopped into meat paste by the second prince in front of the 2 armies. This kind of feeling must be very satisfying. I believe that outsiders can understand it, right? And now, your last remaining son is about to raise the butcher's knife against his biological father, killing the emperor, killing his father, and achieving hegemony. Is it heartache? Or is it gratification? But this kind of feeling must be unforgettable, right? Perhaps Your Majesty can look forward to it a little longer. This kingdom that you have ruled over is about to become a thing of the past. It will inevitably fall apart bit by bit, and you will be deserted by your people. You will become a man without a family. Do you have a little more insight into life? The emperor's entire body began to tremble. Suddenly, he widened his eyes and looked at Jun Mo with a look of hatred. Jun Mo, could it be that all of this was planned by you in secret? You are so vicious. You flatter me. Compared to Your Majesty, I can only be regarded as a small sorcerer in the presence of a great sorcerer. The key to this series of events is nothing more than the fact that power makes people crazy. It seems that I only played a small part in it. That's all. This commoner dares not deceive Your Majesty. Jun Moxie smiled faintly. It seemed as if he had just stated the most trivial matter. He tilted his head and looked at the emperor mockingly. Don't you feel that the world is very unpredictable? Don't you feel the vicissitudes of life? Ha ha. Jun Moxie, you have gone too far. The emperor gritted his teeth and roared. His eyes suddenly turned blood red. Too far? I don't think so. Your Majesty, did you feel that you had gone too far when you instructed the Bloodsword Hall to collude with the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family to murder my father and second uncle? Did you feel that you had gone too far? Jun Moxie smiled coldly. And did you feel that you had gone too far when my 2 brothers died because of your conspiracy? Not at all, right? How can you cut weeds without removing the roots? The Jun family has been suppressed by you to the point where they could barely breathe. But you certainly didn't feel that you had gone too far, right? The emperor's life is greater than the heavens, and his subjects are but ants. Even if they are ants with great merits, as long as they pose a threat to your throne, then they are unwarranted. So, you must eliminate them, right? Our June family even has to thank your majesty for not exterminating us. Your majesty, you are very merciful. June Moxie raised his head and laughed. His cold eyes looked at the emperor. The cycle of cause and effect. Retribution is not pleasant. Now that it has fallen to your majesty, you feel that you have gone too far? Haha, this is really funny. Is it really too much? This commoner really doesn't think so. In this commoner's opinion, it's far from enough. That's the truth. You've only lost a few people, but how many heroes have lost their lives to your schemes? Countless upright men have shed their blood for the Tianxiang Empire. They were fortunate enough not to lose their lives to the enemy, but to lose their lives in the hands of their loyal monarch. Don't they think it's too much? June Moxie walked over step by step. His aura was abnormally heavy and oppressive. It was as if even the air had stopped flowing, and everyone felt as if they were suffocating. Do you feel that it was too much just now? Not counting, the truly excessive ones are coming. Yang Huaiyu, today, you will definitely have a taste of it. June Moxie's handsome face suddenly became incomparably sinister. He suddenly shouted, Yang Dan, what are you waiting for? Kill this old bastard in front of you, and you will ascend to the throne. As long as you kill this old bastard with your own hands, you will be able to sit on the throne. I said it. The second prince, Yang Dan, was startled awake by this shout. He couldn't help but raise his head and stare at his father. His eyes were filled with greed and desire. He paused for a moment, then laughed sinisterly. He stuck out his tongue and lightly licked his lips. His eyes became redder and redder as he suddenly shouted, Many thanks to June Sunshao for your appreciation. Father, please don't blame this child for being unfilial. It is you who has forced me too hard. You are already at the end of the road. Why don't you just grant this child's wish? He bent down and picked up a long sword from the ground. He took 2 large steps forward, but his face revealed a struggling and hesitant expression. The feelings he had for his father and son over the years were fighting fiercely in his heart. His face was covered in cold sweat. But in the end, the crazy desire for power prevailed. The temptation of the throne of a monarch who could rule over the world and rule over the 4 seas was too great. Yang Dan roared and suddenly raised his sword. He closed his eyes and slashed down crazily. Pooh! Warm blood splattered on the second prince's face. He opened his eyes again and saw his father looking at him with a heartbroken and despairing expression. His own long sword was embedded in his father's shoulder. At this moment, Yang Dan's body began to tremble. The emperor had never imagined that the ending of his life would be to watch his 3 sons kill each other. Then, he would be killed by his last remaining son, his own son. At this moment, the pain in his heart had reached its peak. Seeing his son's sword land on his body, he didn't even have the thought of dodging. He only looked at the twisted face in front of him, his eyes filled with despair. This is my son, my own son. And he, for the sake of his desire, for the sake of the throne, wants to kill me. He is killing me, killing his own father. Blood splattered everywhere. The second prince exerted force in his hand and lifted the sword that was embedded in his shoulder. His body suddenly trembled, and a crazy desire for power appeared in his eyes. He roared, You old bastard! Why aren't you dead yet? Why aren't you dead yet? Hurry up and die. Go and die. Ah, he screamed crazily and slashed down crazily again. He screamed and slashed, his face filled with madness and fanaticism. Blood flowed freely, and pieces of flesh splattered on his body. But he didn't seem to care. At this moment, he only wanted to kill the person in front of him, the last obstacle in his way to the throne. Chapter 781. After a long while, Yang Huaiyu's corpse was almost unrecognizable. Only then did the second prince stop. panting heavily. He threw away the bloodstained sword with a clang and panted heavily. The surroundings were completely silent. Everyone stared in shock at this prince who had crazily hacked his own father to death in front of everyone. Their eyes were filled with incredulity. The second prince's body suddenly trembled. His eyes slowly regained some focus. He suddenly opened his arms and roared crazily, "Haraha! He is dead! This old bastard is finally dead! Did you see that? Did you see that? From today onwards, I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am finally the emperor." Ha! Maniacal laughter, hysterical laughter, echoed in the surroundings. "Yes, you are the emperor. I will keep my words. Come, I will bring you to sit on the throne that you have been dreaming of for a long time." June Moxie looked at him mockingly.
"Ah, good.
Good, 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 ha ha ha, there is one here." The second prince laughed crazily. He suddenly broke into a run and ran towards the emperor's carriage. In the carriage, there was a dragon throne. His Majesty, the emperor, was sitting on it. The second prince ran over, panting. He used his hands and feet to climb up the carriage. He roared, "Get lost! Get lost! Did you not see that? I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am the emperor who rules over the world." Ha ha! He finally climbed up and sat on the throne. He touched it and looked around. He laughed crazily and patted the armrest of the dragon throne. His face was crazy and proud. "How is it? The feeling of sitting on the dragon throne. Is it satisfying?" A voice asked mockingly. "Satisfying?
Ah,
Ha ha. How can it not be satisfying?"
of course it is satisfying. It is too satisfying. It is so satisfying.
"For this throne, I have been dreaming for more than 30 years. Emperor, the throne. I am finally the emperor." The second prince laughed crazily. "Since it is satisfying, come down." June Moxie suddenly appeared in front of him. "I have fulfilled my promise. You have already sat on this chair. I sat on it for real.
No.
I am the emperor. I want to sit forever. I won't go down even if I die." The second prince's eyes were red as he roared hysterically. "But I only promised to let you sit on it once. I didn't plan to let you sit on it forever." June Moxie looked at him as if he was looking at a corpse. "Get down here." At this moment, a bugle horn sounded from afar. An unusually majestic voice rang out. "Prince Equivalent has brought his crown prince here to rescue the king and quell the rebellion. Everyone, put down your weapons. Those who surrender will not be killed. Grand Preceptor Li has led his troops to rescue the king and assist King Pingdeng to quell the rebellion. Everyone, put down your weapons. Those who surrender will be spared from death." Drums beat, horns sounded, and the sound of horse hooves came from all directions like a tsunami. King Equality? What was he doing here? Could it be that he also wanted to be the emperor?
No.
"This throne is mine. It belongs to me alone. Whoever tries to fight with me will die. Kill him for me."
Kill him.
Emperor? You are not worthy." The second prince was still clamoring, but June Moxie had already grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up like a little chick. With a casual toss, the second prince's entire body flew 300 to 400 jong like he was riding on the clouds, landing heavily on the ground. The blood on the ground splattered everywhere. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The second prince had already lost a lot of his qi and blood because of his sensual pleasures. His physical strength was not even comparable to that of an ordinary youth. After being thrown by Jun Dashao, he was lucky that he did not die. It seemed impossible for him to stand up with his own strength. "Guards, capture this lawless traitor who slaughtered his own brothers and father and present him to the Prince of Equality. Everyone else, lay down your weapons. Anyone who disobeys will be punished with the same crime and killed without mercy." The person who shouted this shocked everyone even more. This person was actually young Master Li Yuran. He had single-handedly assisted the second prince to achieve great things, instigated the second prince to kill the first prince, and was the most beneficial supporter in seizing the throne. What was going on? The change in the scene before his eyes was so strange. This was too unimaginable. The Prince of Equality's subordinates rushed over from all directions with the force of Mount Tai. Originally, both sides had no fighting strength, no fighting spirit, and would collapse at the slightest touch. The outcome was decided in an instant. The Prince Equivalent's Crown Prince, Yang Mo, looked at Jun Moxie standing in the middle of the rebel army. His eyes were filled with excitement and gratitude. All of this was originally impossible. But it was this elder brother Mo Xie who had single-handedly destroyed the Tian Xiang dynasty that Yang Huaiyu had once ruled, and even helped him and his son to be together. Jun Moxie smiled and winked at him. Now was not a good time for the two of them to talk. In the distance, Li Yuren's white clothes fluttered in the wind. She had already come down from her high chair and was calmly walking towards Jun Moxie. Jun and Mo Xie smiled and went up to meet them. The enmity had been settled, and it was time to get away. The chaotic situation had reached an extreme point. No one had seen, or perhaps no one had noticed, that Jun Moxie and Li Yuran had disappeared without a trace. Aristocratic Hall. Manager Tang Yuan was flabbergasted as he looked at these two people who he had thought would never walk together in his lifetime. Jun Moxie and Li Yuran. In Tang Yuan's mind, as long as these two people met, they would either ridicule each other, or they would start a fight. But now, they were walking side by side, as if they were good friends. How could Fatty Tang not be taken aback? Tang Yuan stared blankly at the two of them before raising his head to look at the sky, as if trying to see if the sun had risen from the west today. He then rubbed his eyes with all his might before letting out a strange cry. He fiercely sucked in a breath of air, causing his fat belly to tremble up and down a few times like rolling waves. Finally, he spoke with great difficulty. I'm really not dreaming. How did you two end up together? Jun Moxie could not help but laugh.
Why?
Is it strange? Fatty Tang opened his mouth and looked like he was going crazy. How can it not be strange? How did you two? Li Yuran also laughed. Tang Yuan, there are some things that may not be true even if you see it with your own eyes. Just like today. I can walk into the aristocratic hall with the third young master. But do you know that I don't have the slightest confidence that I'll be able to walk out alive? Tang Yuan opened his eyes wide. He sighed in relief and said, That's good. That's good. Even with Li Yuran's self-restraint, he couldn't help but roll his eyes when he heard these words. This fatty is too unrestrained. Is it worth it for you to be so happy when you hear that my life is in danger? Jun Moxie looked at Li Yuran with a smile and said, Fatty, you come too. He took the lead and walked upstairs after saying that. Tang Yuan complied and followed behind him.
Li Yuro was the last.
His eyes were filled with a plump buttocks that took up 2/3 of the corridor. The stairs under his feet creaked, and he couldn't help but worry that the stairs would be crushed by Fatty Tang's weight. Tang Yuan's weight had actually decreased by a lot. After Jun Moxie had helped him lose weight, Tang Yuan's weight had been maintained at 200 pounds for a few days. Then, it had slowly rebounded and finally stabilized at less than 300 pounds. If it had been before, that buttocks would have occupied 2/3 of the corridor and would have been filled with fat, of course. Tang Yuan was very satisfied with this outcome. Sun Xiaomei was also very satisfied, sitting down on the chair in a daze. Tang Yuan looked at Jun Moxie on the main seat, and then looked at Li Yuran opposite him. He scratched his head and asked in confusion, Boss, what's the matter? Jun Moxie sighed. Kid, you've fallen into a tender nest and never come out again. You've taken Sun Xiaomei, haven't you? Tang Yuan was instantly beaming with joy, and his fat face was filled with the color of youth. He grinned and said, Third young master knows me the best. But we're engaged, so isn't it reasonable? Is it strange? Jun Mo Xie snorted and said, Then you'd better hurry up with serious matters. If that little fatty comes out before you've even gotten married, that would be bad. I reckon that father-in-law of yours won't let you off either. Of course. In the next 2 or 3 months, the date has already been set. Tang Yuan rolled his eyes and said, But I know what I'm doing. It won't happen. Thank you for your concern, boss. By the way, your gift can't be too shabby. Don't look at me as the god of fortune. Compared to you, boss, I'm just a little rich. The three laughed at the same time. Li Yuran smiled at Jun Moxie and said lightly, "You are leaving? Have you decided?" Before Jun Moxie could answer, Tang Yuan was already anxious and stood up. "Leaving? Where are you going? What are you going to do? When are you leaving? When are you coming back? Don't tell me you can't miss my good thing?"
Fatty, sit down.
"I'm here to talk to you about this." Jun Moxie smiled and said to Li Yuran, "Yes, I'm preparing."
"So you're worried?"
"You're very conflicted." Li Yuran smiled and tapped her fingers on the table. "You're considering whether it's better to kill me?
Or to keep me?"
If you keep me, will that little Emperor Yang Mo you've appointed be able to control me?" "That's right." Jun Moxie smiled with some appreciation. "I'm considering this matter. It's indeed very conflicted." Li Yuran was silent for a moment. She slowly stood up and walked to the window. She said lightly, "When you suddenly disappeared a few days ago, I guess that you went to take revenge. So, I immediately arranged this matter. Because if you don't come back, everything will be over. But if you can come back, then it means that the remaining 6 saints have all died in your hands. You definitely won't leave any loose ends. But if this happens, the Jun family will have to leave." Li Yuran looked out of the window and said with a sigh, "I don't know what method you used to kill the 6 saints, but you did succeed. But because of this, your path is getting narrower and narrower. You're only left with the Tian Fa forest. If you don't leave, you'll definitely die. But if you leave, you definitely won't be willing to leave with regrets. And you won't be willing to let all your previous arrangements go to waste. So, the Second Prince's rebellion this time is a whole month ahead of my original plan. Consider it a big gift for me, Li Yuran, before you leave." Chapter 782. What you're worried about is nothing more than that little rascal, Yang Mo. In other words, what you're worried about isn't Yang Mo, but that you don't want your previous arrangements to be destroyed by me. That's all, Li Yuran said in a low voice. With my, Li Yuran's intelligence, nobody can control me. Yang Mo, or his father, the Prince of Equality, Yang Huainong, none of them can.
"They're not worthy."
He raised his head slightly and looked into the distance, "But I'm willing to be controlled by them. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Jun Moxie nodded. "Looks like you've recognized yourself." "That's right. The two of us have always walked 2 different paths. I don't know what you're pursuing, but what I, Li Yuran, seek is nothing more than a life of riches and glory. What I'm pursuing is only power. For the sake of supreme power, I can do anything. Why can't I be controlled by others for the sake of power? Moreover, it's only on the surface." Li Yuran smiled. "All these years, I've always hidden behind the scenes, giving advice and devising strategies. But I've never appeared in front of anyone. I, Li Yuran, can be an outstanding schemer. But unfortunately, I don't have the bearing of a monarch. My position is suitable to be below 1 person, but above tens of thousands. That's the most suitable position for me. Is third young master satisfied with my answer?" Li Yuran's eyes flickered, but she said resolutely. Jun Moxie pondered for a long time, but he didn't say a word. Li Yuran stood quietly in front of the window, not making the slightest movement. The two of them, one sitting and one standing, were like clay sculptures. The atmosphere in the room was even more oppressive. After a long time, Jun Moxie finally opened his mouth. "Li Yuran, if I really want to leave, and the people from the 3 holy lands come again, how will you deal with it?" "Deal with it? What else is there to deal with? Just tell me the truth." Li Yuran heaved a sigh of relief. However, she forced a smile and said, "If I tell them the truth, they won't blame me for letting you go, right? Even 6 of the 9 saints have perished at your hands, so it's obvious how powerful you are. If I insist on stopping you from leaving, then wouldn't I be a fool? Even if they are dissatisfied, they won't take it out on me, right?" Jun Moxie smiled. He was very satisfied with Li Yuran's answer. He then turned to Tang Yuan, his eyes filled with deep emotions. Fatty, do you want to retreat with me? I'm afraid they'll vent their anger on you because of our relationship. Jun Moxie was worried about the only friend he recognized in this world. Fatty's temper was also the rebellious type. If he did not have the support of a strong backer, it would be easy for him to be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, he believed that the people from the 3 Holy Lands also knew that Fatty was his friend. If he really stayed, the danger he would face would be even greater than others. I'm not leaving. I definitely won't leave this place, Tang Yuan said straightforwardly. Then he smiled and said, I don't want to go to Tian Fa Ferocious Lands. Ever since I was young, I've always wanted to earn all the riches in the world. Right now, I'm in the process of achieving this goal. How can I bear to leave? How can there be any opportunities to earn money in Tian Fa Ferocious Lands? I definitely won't go. Fatty might have said this, but he was thinking about something else in his heart. Eldest brother, the Tian Fa Forest is indeed a place where there are no opportunities to make money. But we still need to spend money to eat and drink. If I don't stay behind to support this base, what will you do? It's safe, but it doesn't mean you can eat it. Do you want to rob it? Even if you rob, there doesn't seem to be a place to rob, right? Jun Moxie was not surprised by Fatty's answer. He could even vaguely guess Fatty's true intentions. Fatty's feelings for him were undoubtedly sincere. He was willing to take the risk to stay behind for Jun Moxie's future development. On this point, Jun Moxie did not doubt Fatty's intentions. He never would. Although Fatty loved money, as long as Jun Moxie said he needed money, Fatty would definitely take out all his savings immediately, leaving only a pair of underwear for himself. On the other hand, Fatty was an extremely realistic person. He was the type of person who was content with a little bit of wealth. Although his request was definitely not a little bit of wealth, it should be the standard of a lot of wealth. But deep down, he was such a person. Jun Moxie undoubtedly advocated doing as he pleased and doing as he pleased. On the other hand, what Fatty Tang Yuan pursued was another form of doing as he pleased and doing as he pleased. Fatty loved excitement, enjoyment, and beautiful women. He especially loved the thrill of using money to kill people. He called it the greatest thrill. Moreover, this fellow was extremely lazy. Back then, Jun Moxie had given him a set of martial arts to practice. But other than the one time Jun Moxie had run through it for him, he had never practiced it again. He did not even have the thought of practicing it even once. If he allowed Fatty to follow him to Tian Fa Forest, then it was tantamount to robbing Fatty of all the fun in his life. Therefore, Jun Moxie had only asked casually. Let him continue on the path that he had chosen. Everyone had their own destiny. This was something that could not be forced. He could help his brother clean up the mess, but he could not choose the path for him. If he forced himself to choose for others, regardless of his standpoint, regardless of his starting point, it would be beyond the bounds of propriety. For example, a long life, unparalleled martial arts. Some people would desperately pursue these things, but some people would completely disdain them. Fatty was such a person, and so was Li Yuran. There was no other reason. Everyone pursued different things. It could be glory and splendor, wealth and rank, or the power to control everything. Or perhaps it could be the imperial power that many people would kill each other for. But in Jun Moxie's heart, all of these things were like weeds. Everyone had their own standpoint and their own values. That was all. Jun Moxie was silent for a while and said, Everyone has their own aspirations. Since you have made this decision, I will not force you. Later, I will ask Hai Qinfeng and Song Shang for their opinions. If they are willing, let them stay and accompany you. You won't suffer too much of a loss in the Tianxiang city or even in this continent with these 2 experts around. Tang Yuan's eyes lit up, but he agreed without saying anything. Hai Qinfeng and Song Shang had already reached the level of Superior Supreme. With these 2 great experts keeping watch, most things would go smoothly. And these 2 people were the spies that Jun Moxie had arranged to stay in the continent. However, Jun Moxie's words were not only for Tang Yuan to hear, but also for Li Yuran. Li Yuran smiled and said, "Third young master, you can rest assured. I, Li Yuran, may not be a good person, but fortunately, no matter what I do, I always have a plan in mind." June Moxie smiled meaningfully and said, "Well said. You have a plan in mind. This is also one of the reasons why I did not kill you." He paused for a while and said, "I will explain to the Prince of Equality and his son about your matter. I believe that they will not abandon a talented person like young Master Li." Li Yuran's expression changed, and she said solemnly, "Then, thank you very much." June Moxie's words carried a lot of weight. With Li Yuran's intelligence and the Li family's strength, it would not be too difficult for her to rise in Tianxiang's officialdom and occupy a position. But it was believed that she would never truly enter the core position of power, because the Prince of Equality and his son had always been on June Moxie's side. And in the eyes of outsiders, Li Yuran's family and the June family were not compatible at all. In fact, they had always been enemies. This was undoubtedly Li Yuran's biggest weakness. Even if Li Yuran's plot to kill Yang Huaiyu and his sons could be said to have made a great contribution to the Prince of Equality and his son, it was just icing on the cake. As long as there was a word from Jun Dashao, all the contributions would be for naught. Similarly, now that June Moxie had said it with certainty, it could also make Li Yuran's biggest worry disappear without a trace. And it would become a great thing. This would be of immeasurable help to Li Yuran's future career. Oh, that's right. Third young master, if you really want to live in seclusion in the Tianfa forest, outsiders will naturally not be able to enter. But although we can't touch the Xian beasts in the Tianfa forest, those rare medicinal herbs and our aristocratic hall will still continue to operate. The profits will still be the same as before. You get 90% and I get 10%. Fatty Tang laughed evilly and quickly thought of a new plan to make money. If his plan was approved by June Moxie, then the Tianfa forest would henceforth become Fatty's personal cornucopia. This was a direct monopoly, an unquestionable monopoly. Although June Moxie would still get 90%, the remaining 10% would be more than enough for Fatty to become the continent's richest man. Jun Dashao would have to separate himself from the human race in the future. June Moxie smiled and said, "You don't need to worry about this. You can rest assured that I already have a plan. The ratio can't be 90% for you, 60% for me, 30% for you, and 10% for Yang Mo. That would be better. Otherwise, the royal family won't be able to get any soup if you just eat the meat. Sooner or later, they'll confiscate your family's assets. You can't always be under my protection." Tang Yuan was overjoyed. Even Li Yuran couldn't help but reveal a sincere look of envy on her face. Then, her face turned into ecstasy. This was a huge piece of cake. Even if the Tianxiang royal family only owned 10% of the profits, it would still be extremely generous. In fact, it would be enough to make the Tianxiang empire richer than the other countries. In fact, it could even make the Tianxiang empire the first unified country in the continent if it was used properly. When that time came, Li Yuran would have even more space to show off his skills. Whether it was the southern or northern expeditions, or the various domestic undertakings, everything would be carried out smoothly. Leaving his name in the annals of history was a sure thing. Chapter 783. Well, I really have to go. Perhaps the two of you can discuss some other matters. June Moxie smiled as he looked at Li Yuran. Before we part, I'll tell you the truth. I never intended to kill you from the beginning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you here. I know. Besides, I've never been a person willing to take risks. Li Yuran smiled gratefully and said in a low voice, "Although I believe that you won't need me for anything in the future, I still want to say this. If there's a need, Li Yuran will spare no effort. Just for today's words." June Moxie laughed heartily and turned around to go downstairs. Behind him, Li Yuran's bitter words could be heard. "Third young master, I hope you take good care of Rime." June Moxie's body couldn't help but pause, and he sighed deeply. Tang Yuan's voice carried a sobbing tone. Third young master. If I miss you, I'll go to the Tian forest to find you. You mustn't let those big tigers eat me. My meat is still too greasy and not tasty. At this moment, the streets were in a state of martial law. Groups of soldiers were lined up in neat formations, patrolling back and forth. There were still several places in the city where smoke was rising in spirals. But the previous noisy scene of battle cries had disappeared without a trace. Jun Moxie walked slowly on the streets, but no one dared to question him. When he returned home, he was surprised to find that the excited prince equivalent and his family were already waiting for him in the Jun residence. The Emperor Yang Huayu's family, who wielded the power of the Tianxiang imperial family, had been wiped out in the last 3 days. At present, only the prince equivalent, Yang Huainong, and his son, as well as Princess Raimu, had the bloodline of the imperial family. The country couldn't be without a monarch for even a day. Princess Raimu was ultimately a woman. It was only natural for the prince equivalent to ascend the throne. No one would object. Besides, the emperor's family of 4 had killed each other. No one would criticize them. Jun Moxie said a few words to Master Wang Pingdeng. He especially mentioned the Duga family, the Tang family, Li Yuran, and the others. Now, Yang Huainong and his son looked at Jun Moxie as if they were looking at a deity. Naturally, they would agree to his request without any hesitation. It could be said that Tianxiang Kingdom now had the backing of a super aristocratic family. On top of that, they might have to avoid the most dangerous place in the world, the Tian forest. Even if there was no substantial assistance, this would be a great help to public opinion. How could Yang Huainong and his son disobey any of Jun Moxie's instructions? Not to mention the fact that both sides had a very harmonious relationship. The little devil, Yang Mo, seemed to be the third shopkeeper of Jun Moxie's aristocratic hall. In addition, the Jun family and the Silver Blizzard City had basically established an in-laws relationship. The magnificent jewel hall of the Silver Blizzard City was located in the Tianxiang Kingdom. Naturally, it would become one of the Tianxiang Kingdom's allies for Yang Mo and his son, who had a hot pancake in their cold hands. This was an indescribable joy. This was equivalent to gold ingots ceaselessly falling from the sky, and it smashed both father and son to the point they were dizzy. They were simply happy to the point they didn't know what to do. However, there were many matters to attend to at the moment, so after exchanging greetings for a while, Jun Mo Xie very considerately ordered them to leave, and the soon-to-be emperor father and son hurriedly took their leave. Jun Moxie ordered everyone to speed up their preparations for the evacuation. Then, he returned to his own courtyard. He still had one more thing to do: to wake up Princess Raimu. In the bedroom, Princess Raimu was still quietly lying on the bed. Under the miraculous hands of Jun Moxie, she had recovered very quickly. Her previous external injuries were basically no longer a problem. Only the bone injury on her knee and the extravasated blood in her brain had yet to be removed. Princess Raimu had now become Jun Moxie's biggest hot potato. First, her parents had turned against each other. Then, her mother had died in her father's hands. Then, Uncle Yi, who was closest to her, had died because of his lover's death. Now, her remaining relatives, her father and 3 brothers, had also killed each other in a matter of days. This proud daughter of the heavens had now become the most pitiful orphan girl. She had no relatives to turn to. What would she do if she was really saved? But if she was not saved and directly brought to the Tian forest, what was that called? Although the emperor's family was not killed by Jun Moxie himself, in the end, all of them died under Jun Moxie's plan. If not for the fact that young Master Jun had purposely arranged for them to kill their brothers and father, it was inevitable that he would have personally taken action and used the most vicious methods to kill them. But even though these people were unpardonable and deserved to be punished, they were still Princess Raimu's relatives. The simplest way at the moment was to kill Raimu with a palm and send her to the underworld so that she would not suffer in the human world anymore. But when he thought of Empress Murong Xiu's last wish before he passed away, the simplest way became the most impossible choice. But it was not a solution to be in a stalemate like this. As for where to go, let her make the decision herself. June Moxie looked at the sleeping Princess Raimu on the bed and decided to do so. Now, although Princess Raimu was sleeping all day, her body functions were much better than before she was injured under the nourishment of the spiritual energy. She should be able to bear the impact. There were many complicated things in front of him, and he could not delay any longer. June Moxie finally decided to save her. As he thought about it, he gently covered the top of Princess Raimu's head with his spiritual energy. A faintly discernible purple spiritual energy was triggered from June Moxie's hand and instantly entered Princess Raimu's head. It integrated into her blood vessels and slowly dissolved the blood clots in her brain. Under June Moxie's careful control, the blood clots in Raimu's brain were dissolved by the purple spiritual energy bit by bit. Then, they turned into dust particles and completely integrated into her blood vessels. Then, with the circulation of her blood vessels, when they left her brain, June Moxie again used his spiritual energy to separate the dust-like waste from her blood vessels and force them out through the pores of her skin. Under June Mocie's precise control, everything was done with ease, and everything was done in an orderly manner. Princess Ling Meng felt as though she had just woken up from a long and painful nightmare from which she had finally woken up. He slowly opened his eyes. The light in the room was not very strong, and he actually felt a stab of pain in his eyes. Where is this? You are... Princess Raimu looked at June Moxie in a daze. Suddenly, she opened her eyes. June Moxie? Where's my mother? Where's my mother and Uncle Yi? Are they okay? Where are they now? She suddenly sat up from the bed as she spoke. Her actions had affected the bone in her knee, and she had felt a burst of pain. However, she didn't seem to feel it at all. Instead, she anxiously grabbed June Mocie's clothes. Princess, your mother and your Uncle Yi. June Moxie looked at Princess Raimu's frightened eyes and could not help feeling sad in his heart. He said in a low voice, "Both of them have passed away, and now they are buried. Rest in peace." Princess Ling Meng muttered those words in a daze, seemingly unable to comprehend the meaning of those words. She stared blankly in front of her. Suddenly, she recalled what had happened before she fainted. Her entire body trembled, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She shouted, "Mother, Uncle Yi, you are so cruel. Why did you leave me like this? Why did you leave your little Meng like this? Why didn't you take me with you? Why did you leave me in this cruel world?" Halfway through her words, her tears flowed down uncontrollably. Suddenly, she could not catch her breath and fell straight down. June Dashao acted as a firefighter again. He injected spiritual energy into Princess Raimu again. Finally, she woke up again. She leaned on June Moxie's leg and cried loudly. After a long time, she finally asked in a hoarse voice, "The murderer, is it him?" June Moxie nodded silently and said in a low voice, "It's him." Princess Raimu's whole body trembled, and her eyes revealed sincere despair. She murmured, "It's him? It's really him. Then, what should I do? What should I do?" "You don't need to think about this anymore." June Moxie took a deep breath and said, "This has been avenged." "Avenged? Why has it been avenged?" Princess Raimu murmured and repeated. Suddenly, she straightened her body in shock. She looked at June Moxie with her big tearful eyes without blinking and said as if she was dreaming, "Avenged? You mean, June Moxie swallowed his saliva. For the first time, he felt that some words were not appropriate to say. It's true that it has been avenged. The murderer and his 3 sons are all dead. As for you, you have been in a coma for nearly 2 months. The murderer and his 3 sons are all dead." Princess Raimu was stunned. Now, she was like a yes man. Every time June Moxie said a sentence, she would murmur a sentence. After a long time, she finally understood. The so-called murderer and his 3 sons, were they her father and her 3 brothers? Dead? Princess Raimu's body suddenly trembled violently. She asked weakly in a hoarse voice. How did they die? She gradually came to her senses. She knew that June Moxie would definitely not joke with her at such a time and on such a matter. It's roughly like this. Just a few days ago, the second prince, Yongdan, suddenly rose in revolt and killed the first prince. Then he rebelled. The emperor and the third prince sent troops to suppress him. Both sides fought, and the second prince killed the third prince in front of the two armies. Then he killed His Majesty the Emperor, Yang Huaiyu. Finally, the second prince was captured by Prince Equivalent and was beheaded as an apology to the world. June Moxie said concisely. In the end, he scratched his head in embarrassment. Looking at Princess Raimu, who was listening intently, he said, "Of course. I played a part in this matter. I was the one who encouraged the second prince to rebel. I, June Moxie, could be said to have single-handedly planned and added fuel to the fire. I believe you understand the reason. It's for revenge. I want to avenge my father, my second uncle, my two brothers, and the countless innocent souls who died because of this." Princess Raimu's eyes gradually filled with shock. She even forgot to cry. She looked at him in shock and did not make a sound. Chapter 784. Looking at Princess Raimu staring at him blankly, as if she didn't hear him clearly, June Moxie sighed and explained everything from the beginning to the end. From the death of Yi Gahan and Morong Xiao Xiao, to the Tomb of Lovers, to the encouragement of the second prince, to the grudges, he told her everything. Princess Raimu finally understood. She closed her eyes miserably, and 2 lines of tears flowed down. Her father sent a killer to kill her mother, which was equivalent to killing her uncle Yi. From this point of view, they were her enemies. But no matter what, he was still her father. After that, June Moxie plotted to make her father and 3 brothers kill each other and die a violent death. From this point of view, it could be said that regardless of June Moxie's starting point, he had indirectly avenged her. But he had also plotted against her father. No matter how emotional they were, in terms of blood, he was still her father. Princess Lingmeng was at a complete loss. She panicked. What should I do now? Thinking of this, she raised her head in panic and looked at June Moxie. She said miserably, "June Sunshao. June Moxie, what should I do?
Who can tell me?
What should I do? Can you tell me?" Looking at Princess Raimu, June Moxie couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The person in front of him was the only remaining princess of the royal family. She was the favored daughter of the heavens. She had a distinguished identity and was in the prime of her life. She was extremely beautiful. Such a woman should have enjoyed all the glory and favor and had a smooth life. But she had such a hard life. She had grown up since her childhood, except for her mother and an outsider like Yi Guhan. No one had given her the slightest bit of affection or warmth. She had grown up with great difficulty. But her mother had died tragically at the hands of her father. She had died in front of her. Yi Guhan, who had loved her the most, had become disheartened. And her father, who was her enemy, was also killed in the power struggle. The princess of a kingdom had actually become an orphan. Now, when one looked up at the vast world, there was actually not a single relative who could not be tolerated by the country, the family, and the relatives. Other than June Moxie in front of her, there was no one else she could rely on. As for June Moxie, to a certain extent, he was her father's murderer. The fate of the world was so bizarre that it was actually like this. All these unforeseen events had happened to the same person. How could it be just the vicissitudes of life? On her deathbed, "Your mother entrusted you to me." June Moxie thought for a while and said, "Also, before Yi Gahan died, he asked me to take good care of you." June Moxie found it difficult to say these words. He even felt a little awkward. Killing her father and brother, and then taking care of her. What the hell was this? Why do I feel like I'm more of a bully than a bully?
But June Moxie had to say it.
He also did not want to face Princess Raimu. Not only did Princess Raimu feel uncomfortable, but He also felt uncomfortable in his heart. No matter how evil the emperor was, his blood relationship with Princess Raimu could not be erased. However, this was what Morong Xiao and Yi Gahan entrusted before they died. It was their deepest care for Raimu. Jun Mo Xia also couldn't erase this kind of sentiment. So, he set it out and let Princess Raimu make the decision herself. If Raimu chose to leave, Jun Moxie would naturally arrange everything for her. But if she chose to stay, Jun Moxie would not object. Just take it as the last thing he did for Morong Xiao and Yi Gahan. As for what happened in the future, let nature take its course. Who could say for sure? Princess Raimu lowered her head. Her face was haggard. Her feelings towards Jun Moxie went from disgust to curiosity, then to admiration, and then to gratitude and mysteriousness for the knife that saved her life. Slowly, it turned into vague feelings between a man and a woman. If it was before this, she would have been extremely shy and happy to hear this news. But now, she did not feel happy at all. Her heart had been filled with all kinds of things. From having everything to having nothing, the time was too short. For her, it was actually just a moment. Because before her mother died, she still had everything. Before her mother died, she had already fallen into a coma. When she woke up, everything was gone. Things remain the same, but people change. It was like waking up and the whole world changed. This feeling was even a bit like the legendary time travel. When one woke up, they had traveled from Earth to the Xian continent. But Princess Raimu had much more sorrow than a time traveler. It was really unbearable. Raimu, listen to me. You have to pull yourself together. Maybe I shouldn't say this at this time, but time is really pressing. I hope you can make a decision as soon as possible. Because of some reasons, once the sun rises, the Jun family will completely evacuate from Tianxiang. We will enter the Tianfa forest and stay away from the secular world. Jun Mo Xia said. If you don't have any other arrangements, you can choose to come with us. If you wish to stay behind, I can also speak to the King of Equality and the others and let them take good care of you. The King of Equality is a loyal person, so he will definitely treat you well. Jun Moxie slowly explained the specific situation that the Jun family had to face. Then he said softly, I can only give you half a night to think about it.
I'm sorry.
Princess Raimu's pretty face inexplicably turned red. But she resolutely said, Jun Moxie, I really don't want to stay in this ugly and sinful world anymore. I sincerely hope that I can go to a place where no one knows me and live the rest of my life in peace. From then on, everything in this world will have nothing to do with me. I think you can help me, right?
Please don't misunderstand.
I don't have any intention of pestering you. I just want to go to a place where I can live the rest of my life in peace. Jun Moxie grinned. He thought in his heart, a place where no one goes? Isn't this the Tianfa forest? It's really the will of the heavens. You want me to not misunderstand and not pester you? Who are you kidding? But he pretended to hit it off and clapped his hands. It's such a coincidence. It's really the will of the heavens. Tianfa forest just meets your requirements. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that I have any, that. It's really a coincidence, right? Yes, we're just taking what we need. Princess Raimu said sadly, since I'm leaving tomorrow morning, I want to burn some incense for my mother and Uncle Yi. I'm afraid there won't be many opportunities in the future. Jun Moxie breathed a sigh of relief and said, No problem. I'll arrange it for you right away. It'll be quick. Late at night. The grave of passion. Princess Ling Meng sincerely knelt in front of the tomb. The pain from her knee bone was tearing her heart out. Kneeling for such a long time would cause her bones to become even more unbearable. It might even cause her old injury, which had already healed, to relapse and cause permanent damage. However, she stubbornly refused everyone's kind advice and stubbornly knelt there in front of her. Incense curled and smoke rose. Countless paper money burned in the night sky, creating a hazy color. I don't regret my deep love in this life. I'm willing to wander alone. If there's still fate in the next life, I'd rather betray the heavens than betray you. Princess Raimu looked at the huge gravestone with dreary eyes and murmured, Mother, Uncle Yi, I'm leaving. Your little Meng really has to leave this place, far away. I sincerely hope that you can reunite in the netherworld and become a real husband and wife. Uncle Yi, how I look forward to little Meng being the daughter of you and Mother. If there's a next life, I want to be your real little Meng I'll be obedient. Father, Mother. Suddenly, Princess Raimu understood the true meaning of her name. Little Meng wasn't this the biggest wish of her mother? To be able to reunite with Yigahan, to be able to reunite with her sweetheart. There was no hope in this life, only in her dreams, therefore, her mother named her Raimu, pet name Meng, this was her mother's dream, and also Uncle Ye's dream. Now, the two of them were lying under this cold gravestone. Therefore, Princess Raimu called out from the bottom of her heart, Father, Mother. She was her mother's only daughter. Calling out Father was tantamount to fulfilling the most desired dream of her mother and Uncle Yi. In the next life, I still want to be your daughter, no matter how poor or humble I am, but it's my most desired dream to have such parents in my life. The night wind whimpered, rolling up the unburned paper ashes, fluttering in the air. It seemed that Morong Xiao and Yigahan were nodding with relief and reluctantly waving goodbye to their daughter, wishing her a safe and happy life. If there's a chance, little Meng will come back to see you. Father, Mother, Meng is going. Princess Raimu looked at the gravestone in front of her with infinite reluctance. She almost looked back 3 times with every step, crystal-clear tears constantly flowing down her beautiful face. The wind whistled and gradually grew louder. The branches and leaves of the pine and cypress trees in the grave of passion were blown by the wind at the same time, swaying in the shadows and making rustling sounds. Princess Raimu clearly heard that the rustling sounds were clearly her mother and Uncle Yi gently looking at her back, gently telling her over and over again, Meng have a safe journey. Take good care of yourself. Don't let us worry. Princess Ling Meng suddenly turned around. Her eyes were filled with tears as she used all her strength to shout, Father, Mother. She suddenly knelt on the ground and cried herself hoarse, early in the morning. Outside the Jun family's mansion, all the ministers of the entire Tianxiang kingdom, under the leadership of the new emperor, Yang Huainong, gathered here to see off the Jun family. All the male and female members of the Dugu family were also gathered here. Old man Dugu Zongheng stood upright, holding the old lady's arm. Dugu Wu Di led the heroes and legends to the front of his 7 nephews. Everyone had a look of deep reluctance on their faces. The corners of the old lady's eyes were already filled with tears. On the other side, Li Yuran and Tang Yuan stood together, one fat and one thin. The 2 experts, Hai Chen Feng and Song Shang, stood behind Tang Yuan, looking at the gate of the Jun family with a look of reluctance. Chapter 785. After some reluctance, Dugu Zongheng shouted, Don't be so wishy-washy. What's the use? It's not like we're parting forever. You can come back when you want to. Let's go, let's go. Time is of the essence. The enemy could come at any time. What are you waiting for? Everyone chuckled. Jun Mo Xie straightened his body and faced the crowd. Everyone present here is a friend of my Jun family. My Jun family was forced to retreat this time because we had no other choice. I believe that we will make a comeback one day. Everyone, if there's anything you need, you can send an eagle to inform us. As long as it's within our capabilities, we will not refuse. After saying this, Jun Moxie cupped his hands. Everyone, take care. Everyone returned the gesture. Take care, Master Jun Sun Shao. Take care, Grandpa Jun. Take care, Third Master Jun. Jun Moxie laughed and looked at Tang Yuan one last time. Fatty, the future richest man in Xian. Just wait for your fortune to strike it rich. Ha ha. Jun Zhan Tian and Jun Wei cupped their hands and bid farewell to everyone. Under Jun Moxie's command, the Xian beasts were already ready, and everyone mounted them one by one. Then, Long Crane let out a long roar and took the lead. Like an arrow chasing after the sun, he shot into the sky like a lightning bolt. With a series of roars, thousands of flying Xian beasts rose into the sky, forming a huge flying formation. Under Jun Moxie's command, they flew a circle around Tianxiang City, then suddenly turned around and headed south. Along the way, it stirred up the wind and thunder. Everyone raised their heads to look at the Jun family as they left. Everyone had a pensive look on their faces. This god of war family that had protected Tianxiang for decades had finally left. Even though they were retreating, it was a glorious retreat. Since ancient times, there had never been such an awe-inspiring way of retreating in the sky. Duge Xiaoyi cried into Dongfang when Xian's arms. The wind and thunder finally subsided, and the dust that had been stirred up in all directions gradually settled down. The Jun family silhouettes had long since disappeared from the sky. In Dongfang, a ray of sunlight shone out. Boundless radiance. After returning to the imperial palace, Emperor Yang Huinong immediately issued imperial edicts. From now on, the Jun family's mansion would become the god of war's manor, and no one would be allowed to enter. No one can move any of the settings inside. They even sent people to clean the place regularly. No matter what time it was, they had to keep it clean. The White Commander Jun Wu Hui, the iron-blooded god of war Jun Wu Meng, and the others would be enshrined and worshipped by the entire Tianxiang nation. Another area would be designated for the spirit mausoleum of the Tianxiang army. The grave of the affectionate couple was designated as a forbidden area in Tianxiang's capital city. No one was allowed to enter and destroy it. Anyone who disobeyed would have their entire family executed. Apart from that, there were also dozens of other articles, and all of them were related to the Jun family. The Jun family may have been forced to retreat, but their glory in Tianxiang had reached the pinnacle. It was basically unprecedented, and there would never be anyone who could do it in the future. In the Tianfa forest, Bear Mountain and the rest had not stopped their previous reckless construction. The progress was quite fast, and they had already completed almost half of it. These Xian beasts were strong. Although the work was not meticulous, it was fast and sturdy enough. This saved Jun Moxie a lot of effort. When they arrived at the Tianfa forest, while others were looking around curiously, Jun Dashao had already begun his hard work. There was nothing he could do about it. His power of earth was just too convenient for him to construct buildings. In a day, Jun Dashao hollowed out the small hill behind the Xian beasts and created a magnificent palace. At this time, the countless luminous pearls that he had plundered from the 9 nether first young master's palace were finally put to use first. There was a wide road that could accommodate 10 carriages moving side by side. Huge stone pillars with dragons and phoenixes carved on them stood on both sides of the road. They acted as load-bearing walls that supported the entire mountain. The eyes of the dragons and phoenixes were all luminous pearls on both sides of the road. There were many small paths. Although they were small paths, they were actually very spacious. As the path continued, it led to an extremely spacious hall. Tables, chairs, benches, and household items were all present. Around the hall, there were many smaller rooms. It looked like Jun Dashao had made up his mind not to let the 9 nether first young master's designs dominate. However, what troubled Jun Dashao now was that he did not know how to appear and disappear mysteriously like the 9 nether first young master. He had the majestic palace, but the main door had become the biggest problem. After thinking for a long time, to the point where his head was hurting, Jun Dashao finally decided to use the most traditional and ancient method: wooden door bolts. Piercing 2 holes in the stone wall, binding the door pillars, and then putting on the wooden door. This was the simplest method. Although this was already the simplest method, the workload was not small, even for young Master Jun himself. Only when young Master Jun was halfway through did he realize that this task could also be done by others. Thus, young Master Jun changed from a worker to a supervisor. It could be considered as liberated. Jun Wui and his family had a hall. Old Master Jun occupied one, Dongfang, when Xian and the girls occupied the largest one, and then Jun Dashao built a private space for himself. The countless small paths at the door were the residences of the servants who came with the June family. There were not many servants from the June family who came with them. Most of them had been dismissed. However, the wealth given to any one of them was enough for them to live the rest of their lives in peace. June Moxie was not harsh to those who came with him. He said, "No matter if it's a man or a woman, as long as there's a match, report it to me, and I'll give you the treatment of opening another cave residence. If there's anyone who is not used to it, you can bring it up anytime. The June family will be responsible for settling the money and sending it out of Tian Fa so that they can make a living elsewhere." After being busy for half a month, they were finally able to settle down Bear Mountain, and the rest looked at the busy June family, then looked at the beautiful palace built by June Moxie, and then went back to their own bear den. Suddenly, everything was not pleasing to the eye. That's what a home is. But ours, what's going on? The difference was too big. There was no comparison before, so I didn't feel it. But now, if the June family lives in a house, then we live in a shack at most. Even the rooms of the June family servants are better than ours. Isn't this too much? We're the dignified beast kings of Tian Fa. This is too embarrassing. After the beast kings toured the June family's new residence, all of them fell silent. Only the corners of their mouths were dripping with greed. After suppressing their grievances for 2 days, they finally spoke up. "Brother-in-law, we're all family. Do you think we can also live in such a house? We're all your brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law." June Moxie rolled his eyes and looked at this group of brothers-in-law. There was nothing he could do. The other party had already brought up the words brother-in-law. What else was there to say? He could only continue with his work. By the time the 7 brothers-in-law of the Beast King and the sister-in-law of the Snake King had happily moved into their new residence, June Dashao was so tired that he couldn't move. The 8 Beast Kings didn't have a brother-in-law in their eyes now that they had a new home. Who was a brother-in-law? We must properly enjoy our new residence. Looking at the huge crowd of brothers-in-law, June Dashao weakly announced, "From now on, only those who have reached the first level of Venerable will be able to enjoy such treatment. Those who haven't reached that level, hurry up and cultivate." Bear Mountain and the rest were the only exceptions. There would never be a next time the first level of Venerable. Even Bear Mountain and the other 8 Beast Kings of Tian Fa had not reached that level. Although their physical strength had already surpassed the first level of Venerable, their actual strength had not reached that level yet. Among the Beast Kings, only Bear Mountain and Long Crane were relatively close to that level. The Beast Kings walked away with bloodshot eyes. Looking at the new residents of Bear Mountain and the rest, their eyes were filled with envy and jealousy. They really wanted to snatch it over. For the sake of obtaining such a new home, June Dashao's words had caused a cultivation craze in the Tian Fa forest. It lasted for a long time. If not for the fact that the Venerable Realm was not a profound realm that could be reached with just willpower, June Dashao would probably spend the rest of his life focusing on building houses. Even though he had temporarily sent away many of his brothers-in-law, June Moxie was still extremely busy. First, he used the power of wood to clear out a large piece of land. It had to be close to 1,000 mu of farmland. Then, he used the power of earth to flatten it and turn it into a plantation. Now that he had moved his family here, he couldn't possibly not have anything to eat, right? Although he could buy food, it seemed like he was going too far. He might as well do it himself and have enough food and clothing. But if he wanted to grow crops and vegetables, just having the land was not enough. Without water, how could he make the plants grow? So, with the help of the power of water and the help of the power of earth, he dug out a few deep wells. Then, he brought in spring water from afar and created a small lake-like pond near the farmland. Everything was solved. While June Dashao was busy, some neighbors came to visit. In Tiannan City, General Wan was entrusted by the new emperor to deliver a lot of household items. Everything was piled up outside the Tian Fa forest. Those items were like a mountain. June Moxie waved his hand, and all the level 9 Xian beasts were dispatched to act as temporary movers. They moved all the items back in one go. The side effect was so many level 9 Xian beasts were dispatched at the same time, Scaring General Wan out of his wits, Jun Dashao immersed himself in construction. He decorated the vicinity of the Jun family's residence like a large garden. There were food, toys, and all kinds of entertainment facilities. Even a small lake was set up with a few fishing spots for his grandfather and the rest to relax during this period of time. Jun Dashao was really working hard. He worked hard during the day and studied formations at night. Finally, after nearly a month, he successfully laid out a 5-elements heaven-confounding formation. Jun Dashao set up this formation at the outermost area of the new Jun residence. On the day the formation was activated, the entire mountain range was instantly hidden in a thick white fog. It was so dark that one couldn't see their fingers in front of them. This caused the Xian beasts of Tian Fa to click their tongues in wonder. Bear Mountain tried it himself. He shook his buttocks and went in to test it out. All they heard was a series of rumbling thunder. Then, Bear King flew out, his whole body emitting the smell of roasted bear paws. His face was covered in dirt, and his body was trembling. This was only because the Xian Beast Kings of Tian Fa had an amazing defense. Otherwise, they would have become roasted bears. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.